and welcome to tonight's Skeptic and Ranting, the overwhelming evidence for the resurrection of Jesus. That's right, where we are watching a video from the channel The Word Room called The Overwhelming Evidence for the Resurrection of Jesus. So won't you join James W. and myself, Amy Newman, for a good time worth coming back from the dead. What is up, y'all, and welcome to tonight's Skeptic and Ranting. That's right, the overwhelming evidence for the resurrection of Jesus, which means, James, we're going to get converted tonight. I am ready for it.
You can't deny it.
Woo-hoo. Please, if you are out there on the intertubes, don't forget to like. Right down there on the algorithms, Cooper is telling you how awesome it is. Follow if you are on the Twitch at twitch.tv/Amy Newman Skeptic, or subscribe right down there on the YouTubes and then hit that bell icon to all so you can get reminders to see our premieres or join our live streams. Like right now, what is up, y'all? What is up? Shani right out there going, Jesus never existed. That's not a prediction. That's a spoiler. What do you think, James?
We'll just let the cat out of the bag right away, huh? Regular.
What is up, Binge Thinker? What is up, Aubrey? What is up, Sinister Porpoise? What is up, Shane Bilowitz? Woohoo! What is up, everyone? Carlton. What is up, Carlton? Jupiter Domain, Pragmatic Crystal, and we could be saying hello to you, Slicey Slicer. We could be saying hello to you too if you join us on the live streams, or if you're seeing this afterward, I'm sending love to you as well. We are a skeptic channel, including the two schmucks that you see hosting before you. However, after our opening and closing statements, and of course the opposition viewpoint, we will be breaking into the open mic where you can tell us what you think, atheist or theist, liberal or conservative, come as you are, just please.
Fleur for turf.
Exactly, fleur for turf. I'm not sure which one would be. I can't tell if the word is going to be a positive or a negative one. We're just going to go with more interesting.
Yeah.
I have to do, speaking of that. And I was going to basically do. It bothers me that I have all this. Oh, you see all my tubs. Tub to tub to tub. But I was going to do, I don't know, a Bud Light, basically mocky thing. So I guess I'll quickly go over what appeared to have happened over the past few days from like the random news circuit, because I try and get a algorithmic diet of everything that I can, so that I can, I guess, be tuned in. But apparently there was a Bud Light partnership with a podcaster, a trans activist, Dylan Mulvaney, and they didn't even release like cans that were like everyone is buying in the public, but they did do like a campaign where they did buy her cans, and she did like a commercial for them. And then a significant portion, I would say very specifically, I always blame the religious fundamentalist wing of that. And so it is kind of an odd thing to me, because I don't know if the people who dislike the LGBTQ have noticed, but all the other companies are in supportive of it. And so I will say that if you're going to go to Coors, we're only a few months away until they release their LGBTQ theme cans. And so I'd reach out across to any aisle and just try and give someone a handy. But what I would say is that if you don't want government if you want freedom, if you don't want control, then we should probably just be supporting each other to live and let live. I am going to probably just do like a whole thing to this as a shorter than a normal episode, but like a something. And yes, it is kind of funny that it's like, are we supposed to? I have not drinking a lot of Bud Light. I am a social drinker. And so it's not really my beer of choice. I like something predictably fruity, like if you have a beer that has a orange flavor in it, who knows what that one would be. It's like a howling at the moon. But I will say that I think that there's going to be a backlash to the backlash, because I don't think that people like being told what to do. That'll be my shorten, because I could probably talk and rant about it, but we are here to talk about Jesus. I just had to make some sort of comment, because we should be supporting human beings, and it is just an odd thing because I can't quite tell what it is that like the insult is, except for them existing. And I also say I'll address maybe the one thing, the one controversial comment that I see often is that they say that we are insulting to biological women because we're trying to erase women, which to me is a rather silly statement. I don't know how much of the Christian fundamentalists, in my opinion, on that wing are pushing for it, really do care about women's rights and think that we're going to be erasing them. I think it cuts into a lot of the same other subjects that the religious attack us for. And a $2 super chat, sending out massive love to Amy Newman. Thank you so very much, Shani. I just want to thank our entire audience for also allowing me to rant, because I think I've been wanting to talk about this, but I could probably, like I said, go on and on, because it's one of those where I don't understand, except for the fact that it's us existing. You shouldn't be listening to celebrities probably for your beer drinking opinions anyway, but sending love to, as someone who enjoys a market, I guess we should
We're
be
looking to corporate America for your moral compass of what's right or wrong.
Indeed. I mean, if you were going to make a moral decision based on a commercial, we probably have deeper problems to begin with.
Yeah, I don't know. If do you think Anheuser-Busch really cares about trans rights, or
Oh, no,
baseless
no.
virtue signaling, just trying to,
No.
you know,
100%.
out wokeify the woke. I know that word has connotations, but
No, it's not that they don't care. It's that they made a calculation of which way the wind is blowing. They have said, in my opinion, they're like, well, the people that hate trans people, they're going out, and the people that like trans people are going in. And what's our market? We need new people. And so I don't think they expected to get this much blowback, but I only think it's because I guess it's Bud Light. It's perceived as, blue collar.
Right.
What is up, James? Yes. Can I tell you? And okay, with that, woo zoom boom, we're going to go back on topic. What is up, James Wolfe? Are you aware that the other Amy Newman on YouTube titled Reverend Amy Newman? I absolutely am. I find that coincidence so funny. I think that is an actual case of irony, because if she is an evangelical and an apologist and I am a counter-apologist, we have a form of actual irony. I'm sending love to the other Amy Newman out there. Not
like
that
Ghana.
I wouldn't be monitoring. Sending love to also Tim. And yeah, with that, we're about to be moving into the opposition opinion. It's still, but we're going to
be a belated Easter celebration.
Yes. Well, not only is it belated Easter, we had like our family celebration Easter dinner today. And so we got ham, ladies and gentlemen. I like holidays. I like traditions because they have food. If it's a holiday that lacks food and they're like, we're not going to do that, then I'm not
like
into
Yom
that
Kippur?
holiday. Yeah. I'll take something where we're actually shoving challah down our throats. Challah! Challah at your Yahweh. Wah, 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 wah. Anyway, this housekeeping is sponsored by our channel members, linked in the description. In fact, we have a fantastic girl deck where they get high-level priority if you are a Patreon. That's right. It's actually 15 feet long, though it doesn't start out that way. It's kind of a grower, not a shower, though it shows right down there.
Ken Oven's got a ruler.
Oh, I've been seeing Ken Ham content come back. That must be because a certain YouTuber got yeeted. I don't know. Maybe it's just my feed. Yeah. Maybe Alexa is listening to me whisper things. I'll say Banana Man, and then I'll have What's-His-Face in my feed next.
Well, you just had ham for dinner, so maybe you were talking.
James, Ken Ham coming into my feed. One of them, as I choke on air, one of those is pleasant.
I mean, it's so ridiculous. You could be talking to somebody and they'll say the word Miami.
Great comfort.
And all you'll get spammed with like resort hotels in Miami, like ads like, "Oh, come stay in our hotel. Come stay in Miami."
We're going to
Miami. I wasn't planning on going on a vacation.
This is CIA. But yes, our channel members, which you can get on our evolving badge system, and I see evolving badges sending so much love out there. It triggers creationists who say that we can't evolve. However, they're every 6 levels that the old YouTuber Kent Hoven, they're all real, and yet biological evolution, very much real.
You mentioned that I have to let you guys know the YouTuber Ian Chen He's a really good debater. I like Ian a lot. But every time I've interacted with him, he's always been really cool. But he debated Ken Hovind about a week ago. And if you haven't seen this debate, go watch it because he trolled Ken Hovind like perfect. It was a work of art. So close your ears if you don't want to hear what he did. But what he did, Amy, was he began by saying, I accept Kent's definition of the 6 levels of evolution, so I'm fine with it. And he began to talk about cosmology and the starlight problem and how we know the universe is billions of years old based on the light. And well, Amy, wouldn't you know? After about 5 to 10 minutes, Ken Hovind gets he's getting real flustered. He's like, what are we doing here? The purpose of this debate is for you to present evidence for evolution. What's this got to do with evolution? He's like, but Kent, you're the one who says all these things are part of evolution. You're the one who says cosmology, astronomy, chemistry, all that's part of evolution. He's like, I mean, well, okay. For this context, I just mean biological evolution, but I reserve the right to go back. And,
if you address everything he brings up, he'll say that's a gish gallop. He'll then say 10 different things, and you're like,
well, even he admitted, like, okay, well, if you then once you present evidence for evolution, then I'm going to go back and say, oh, well, you don't know how the universe started. You don't know how life began. I mean, he tells you that he's blatantly going to goalpost shift. He is going to shift the goalpost. You give him what he asked for. Then he's going to run back and say, oh, well, tell me how life began then. Tell me how the universe began. You know, it's just it's a blatant.
Well, every time
Ian did a great job of
talk to a creationist. Woohoo! Every time that you try to get Ken to talk about, or any creationist, when you say, well, where'd you come from? You say your parents. Then they say, where'd they come from? And you go on and on and on. You eventually get to the Big Bang. And you say, why? And you've answered, at this point, a half dozen, once again joking on air, half dozen different questions. And you can't get any further than plank time, and they go, well, hey, you don't answer anything.
That's where God's at. Yeah. They'll, as soon as they get to a point where you reach an I don't know, oh, well, that's where God is. That's God. That's where we bring God into the equation.
And
yeah, we know Bart Ehrman.
We have Bart Ehrman. I hear a cat as well.
He is very intelligent. I do think he's wrong about historicity, though. You can say, oh, well, he knows more than you. Yeah. If you want to take his expertise and say you want to go with him, that's fine. I just think he's wrong on historicity.
And I don't care about whether he existed or not. I care very specifically that he did not resurrect from the dead and that he wasn't a prophet at all. I know that Muslims will even say, well, he was a prophet. So just eliminating whooshu, whooshu, whooshu. Once again, I tried to get him in. Come on. In. Kids.
Although Ian did start that debate off with a dig at Ken Hovind. Ken Hovind's friend, Amy, did you know that Chris Jones, Ken Hovind's friend, the guy who was set up because he was exposing Satan in Bohemian Grove, so they set him up for all these child molestation charges. But according to Ken, he's really innocent. He never did anything wrong. He's been arrested once again for having inappropriate contact with little boys.
Once again.
Go figure. Go figure.
But their objectively morality comes from God, James. And so
I mean, this is
I think
like
they can really do any wrong.
7th or 8th time, maybe. I don't know, maybe more. But I'm sure it's still part of the conspiracy. It's still, the Illuminati and Satan just trying to stop this man from preaching the gospel. I guess maybe.
Yes, just like with all of what was the Jim Jones and all of those gentlemen. They really just want to bring
People's
you to
Temple.
God. Yes. And all right, we're going to quickly just get into the shout outs here. Sending love to davegar, reminding us that
Thanks, davegar.
if we got rid of flurfs, if they just admitted that the world is old and round, 4.5 billion, and round, we would get rid of most of the creationists in this country. If you accept science and religion, good. But if you really want to debate the age of the earth, please stop. Just please stop. Thank you, davegar. Thank you to Senator Cato, reminding us that we're looking for the separation of church and state. We're kind of lucky that we don't live in a country that has a Sharia law or a Christian theocracy, or insert your religion. With secular systems, you can just have whatever religious system you want. Have your own beliefs. Kind of great. Thank you, Senator Cato. Thank you, Emily. Thank you so very much, Emily. Like I said,
thank you.
Triggering of the fundies from the LGBTQ community is our existence. Like, clear and simple, says something in a book that we shouldn't exist. It actually says it multiple different ways. It says that there should be no homosexuality. It says there should be no cross-dressing. And I am at least half of the first one, and they really don't like that I just like to have fun. I just want to have fun. Yes, I'm supposed to get stoned to death for that right there. But, shooting at cans, also really practical. Really practical. Spending money on the cans, doing free advertising. Anyway, thank you, Emily.
Yeah, I mean, Anheuser-Busch doesn't really care whether you drink the beer or shoot it. You still buy the beer. I mean,
you could buy it and pour it out and do it over and over.
As long as you buy it, I mean.
As long as you buy it. But sending so much love to James Wolfe. We saw James Wolfe in chat. We howl at the moon. It has actually been speaking of howling at the moon, it has been a fun, fantastic week, I should probably say. And it's like learning how to fly. And now I feel like I'm getting more comfortable at it. But I am doing multiple avenues of teaching. I am definitely Professor Newman, Miss Amy, whichever way you want to switch those. Holy moly. And the reason I feel now more comfortable in saying that is because I have graded a lot. Now listen, I love it. It has been fantastic. It has been probably more productive than being in internet messaging boards arguing over evolution. How about grading technology and being part of your own crazy. Still crazy to even say those things out loud. But it's been fun. And I still have more to grade. Never ending. Woo!
We'll get through it.
Sending love to James. Well, it also has been lovely to just have everything.
Look who came in.
Oh my. I have to. The Preacher. What's up? You spend so much time talking about religion. Why not just believe the truth that Bob Evans is a really good deal? Oh, wait, no. You spend enough time talking about it and downgrading it. Why not just accept it? Well, The Preacher, welcome on board. And we talk about religion because we kind of view it as a superstition. But
I mean, if you pay attention, we're always telling you why we don't believe it.
True.
That's kind of our thing. We're not just saying we don't believe it just not to believe. We actually tell you why we think it's stupid. Maybe we should do a video series like Ken Hovind did his 100 reasons why evolution is so stupid. We should do like 100 reasons why Christianity.
See, I was gonna hope you were gonna say 100 first dates. Different podcast.
Yeah, give him a few more years, he'll get to his 100th wife.
I want to accept anything that is the truth. We're just not convinced. You suffer the effects of it. Dun, dun, dun. James, this is what happens when we sin.
Like it or not, I mean, I don't think anybody can deny that Western society, civilization has been shaped largely by Christianity. You can't get away from that. You can't outgrow your history. It just is what it is.
Well, a lot of I always separated out, a lot of the founders were deists, and unfortunately a lot of the other people, the lay people, were Puritans. And, who were the people that were having lots of babies? I mean, the Puritans. And so we've suffered the effects of that.
I mean, most of Europe was probably 98% Christian for so long. So that shaped just a lot of a lot of the world today.
Do I like Italian food? I do, but Italian food in America is very very stereotypical. Oh, don't take the bait. Yeah, I guess you're right.
I'm trying to derail. That
is true. I'll go back to sending out my shout outs. Oh, I'm just getting into pasta. Anyway, sending love. In fact, the one and only, the amazing Rachel Holen. Rachel reminds us that the bad type of slavery comes from the good book that says we can take from the nations around you. And the good type of slavery is where we tie up femboys. Slightly different. Do you see the subtlety there, James?
Amy turning fuckboys into femboys.
Though they consented. That's also really the major difference. But yes, we have a pipeline. Very much a pipeline. As well as Dale Pastel. We're looking for empirical evidence. Just a little bit. Not a lot. But if you could just show us any, that's what we're going to get today. Preacher, I will say that I have someone that says that they will consistently give anyone $10,000 if they can prove an adaptation for evolution has ever happened. And I like that number, 10,000, because it's big enough to sound like a good sum of money, but small enough to kind of sound realistic. It's not $1 million, James, or even 100,000, but 10,000, that sounds. But $100 to just we kind of survived that test, and we did it with Pieter. Donations right down there. Super chats, sending love.
We don't send, Preacher. We don't send.
We don't. We have never offended a god
We
ever.
don't sin either.
Exactly. You don't sin. We don't sin. It's fantastic. Sending love to Chris Disciple. Chris Disciple reminds us there are skeptic theists out there.
Chris.
Christians, Muslims, Jews. As long as you're skeptical about your belief systems. And then the 3 commanders of the girl deck. I can't sin. That's right. It is great to not sin. Da-da-da. Da-da-da-da. Ian Davenport, thank you so much for reminding us that watchmaker arguments are terrible. They're kind of not that good. And also, sending love. Well, ha 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 ha. Boo 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 boo. These, by the way, our heart, come from natural sources like your body, from, once again, your parents doing snoo. And a watch was made by an actual creator with a purpose. Someone had a plan. Sending love to Ian Davenport as well as Matt Deig. Sending love to Matt, who reminds us that we want theories. If you say it's just a theory, you probably just need to take a science class.
You might be a flat earther.
Might be a flat earther, a conspiracy theorist. Ha ha ha. And sending love to last but not least, Regos, reminding us that we have a skeptic Bible study. We always got to have a giraffe.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, we do. We do, actually.
We are in the middle of Joshua, although Joshua's been kind of given a death sentence just like Moses. He's like, no, doesn't matter that I'm old. I can still lift. Well, thank you.
That's right, Jupiter. Thank you for the encouragement.
Thank you so very much, Jupiter.
This is what she was born to do.
I will say, feels good being a counter apologist. That's kind of what James and myself are. Just like you're an apologist out there to the preacher. But
We used to believe, now we don't.
Indeed.
We don't believe anything.
But thank you to all of our members, to all of our Twitch. Speaking of which, thank you, Beamsy.
Thanks,
Sending
Beamsy.
so much love. And all the flair you get at twitch.tv/Amy Newman Skeptic and our Patreons at patreon.com/Amy Newman. I am going to send in there, and then we're going to get into the opening statement and opposition viewpoint. And all right. Probably a little bit longer because I had to once again really take my anger out on just. I almost want to make fun of them, but yet, because I've seen other people go, it's light beer, which light beer tastes like water. But
I can honestly say it's been a long time since I had a Bud Light. It's not really what I typically would go for,
Because if you're into, IPAs or you want to be trendy or you want to be hipster or.
I need a flavor. I'm okay with the macros. I mean, I'll take a Budweiser is decent.
Gotcha. Well, I agree. I'm not really for.
I don't think you need everything doesn't have to be gourmet. You don't have to spend $18 for a 6-pack, just to be able to enjoy a decent beer. But the way everything's going now, people spend $26 for a 4-pack because it's supposed to be the best shit in the world, but it's really not.
I'm also not calorie counting when I'm getting drunk. I'm not saying you shouldn't calorie count. I think calorie counting is actually a good way Same with portion sizing is a good way to lose count. But I'm all for that flavor. If I might as well.
Oh,
I don't know. Get some mango. Do something.
you can talk to Ken Hoven about that, Chris. You guys can
Oh my.
cannot drink together.
Huh.
Ken Hoven's I've never tasted beer.
Oh, well, these guys are the same. They're like, I've never tasted beer. I don't curse. We run things very tidy. Of course, he doesn't pay his taxes. He beats his wife, and like a kid or two dies at his park every once in a while. But hey.
Got child molesters on premises.
James, picky.
But oh, actually, it was funny because in Ken's video, remember that bizarre incident with the fire truck he wanted to buy, when he was skulking around the neighborhood, looking in around people's properties, trying to figure out who owned this fire truck. When Ken was when he was berating the people for their lack of hospitality towards him, he had a verse like he pulled up a Bible. I don't remember the verse, but it basically was saying like true believers are not like easily offended. They don't get all worked up. But it's like, but Kent, wait, you're the guy who gets all bent out of shape if anyone uses even the slightest bit of profanity. You get all my ears. I can't believe you said that. And then we've even seen it on this channel. Christians' adverse reaction to even the mildest blasphemy, just the tip of blasphemy, and they get
when that specific event happened, there was a whole bunch of people talking, and I'm like, I'm just coming in here to do like the very mild jokes for introductions, and so it was very like Jesus getting on his knees type of thing. I'm trying to remember.
Who was that? Was that Christ sucks a dick? Oh no, Christ brings a sword. There you go. Christ brings a sword.
Well, if you think about it, you can bring both, or you can use one as the other.
Yeah, either way.
Either one. And all right, I want to thank you to all of our members, to all of our Patreons, which I got there in chat, which really helps us. But with that, I think we're going to transition.
Let's do it.
I am going to do one last.
I've seen it, James Wolfe. Yeah. Every once in a while, he'll make like a joke, a crude joke in regards to the Jews.
All right, the interior designer in me is going against my chaotic nature. Let's get to the monologues. Do. You really? Yeah, you have to be in this time. Okay. You got food? You do your thing? These cats, let me tell you. They say it's worse with a child. I mean better. What did I mean to say? I said better, yes. I'm sure they listen even more when they're children and stuff. Anyway, we are Skeptic and Ranting. The overwhelming evidence for the resurrection of Jesus. Oh, yes. Yeah. Which is what exactly? Beyond a book said a thing?
Well, that's it.
Yeah. Seemed that it. It's been 2,000 years. If I keep waiting, I better get my next 2,000 years free. And it's not like even the supposed eyewitnesses match up. If we peer in further, like witness 357 of those 500 witnesses that saw Jesus come back, or any number at random, they don't exist. Thus, that 500 can be whittled down to a single claim. Or what about the synoptic gospels? Blah, 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 my English. Or Mark, Luke, and Matthew. Sounds similar in their recordings because Matthew and Luke most likely use Mark as their source. I think that would be cheating if they're handing in homework. Not biased at all. And yet still, they can't get their story straight. In the Gospel of Mark, it's 3 women who visit the tomb of Jesus. All right. Matthew adds in guards, whatever you're into. Luke changes one man in a white robe. Cat likes to do dance. In a white robe, watching to 2. Oh my. Once again, whatever you're into. Then adds in Peter. It's getting a little complicated, but let's make it a party. Then John gets rid of the women. Excuse me? Except for Mary. Damn, guys. Get your story straight. Or the DEA, he's going to arrest you. The didn't happen enforcement agency, yes. Because when it comes to the overwhelming evidence for the resurrection of Jesus, scholars seem to be waiting for that bucket loads to drop down. Hell, we're still waiting for God to help us sort this all out himself, because his record keepers seem to be, what's the word? They suck at this. They can't even be reliable across a single text. And the big J-man himself seems not to want to show up to help us find out. You know, like every other prophet from every other religion ever. Thank you.
Ultimated there is trying to send us a message. He's been patiently awaiting a reply.
Patiently, you debate me on the ontological, Jado-Christian, biblicalism soon, and mention me within the title. What I find so interesting, okay, just like the mentality, it's like we have a thing. I guess you could take it as like a general topic and say that maybe I'm the one to defend it, and so I'll be put in the title. But I'm sending love to you, Ultimated. Why do you think that the... Let me break this down. The existence of the Jesus, because we can...
Well, he wants
the
to set
Jewish
up
Jesus.
a formal debate. Not right.
Gotcha.
Not right here, right now.
And hold on one second. Let the cat out. Cat goes in, cat goes out. I am now noticing it's more in the form of a question. And so the answer is yes. That is absolutely a yes. Boo-doo-boo. I'm just trying to break down.
We could just confer in Discord.
See, but I just want to very quickly, the existence of the Jewish/Christian, so the existence of the Bible soon, and mention me. Okay, but see, here's my thing. We will admit the Bible exists. The Bible does exist. The question is, did Jesus come back from the dead? And why do you think so? Anyway, enough of my blabbering. I gave my opening statement. James W., the overwhelming evidence for the resurrection of Jesus. What are your thoughts?
Well, yeah, overwhelming evidence. Yeah. Well, I guess we'll see what he has to say, but I think we know about what we're about ready to get ourselves into, but let's just do it. We could talk about it on the thing.
Woo-hoo. And all right. With that, we are going to be switching into the opposition viewpoint. Or rather, the overwhelming evidence of the resurrection of Jesus from the Word Room.
I mean, I don't even think Jesus ever really existed as a person, per se. So, yeah. I definitely don't think he resurrected.
Now, I watched this on 1.5. What do you think, James? Between a 1 and a 1.5, go 1.25?
Maybe try 1.25, yeah, just to see how it goes.
And right now, what is up? Stolen, happy Saturday.
We're not going to do it right here and now, ultimately.
Yes,
topical.
What we will do is if you tag us with relevant stuff, we will show it. Or we'll talk about it, because we will show any super chats that come up and give us support, sending love to all of our subscribers, viewers, everyone out there. But we are going in the overwhelming evidence for the resurrection of Jesus.
I'm about to tell you a crazy story, and we're going to determine if it's a true story. Just about 2,000 years ago, a man claimed to be God. Now, that's nothing new. People have claimed to be God for generations, and even 2,000 years ago, there were tons of people claiming to be God or the Messiah. This man, however, was slaughtered by Roman execution. Again, not completely out of the ordinary, as many people were killed by Roman execution through crucifixion at that time. But this is where things get a little crazy. Generally speaking, when someone who was a Messiah or someone who claimed to be God, when they were executed, the revolt and the followers of that leader were done. It was over. And it seemed like that's what happened with this man 2,000 years ago. His followers dispersed. The revolt that the Romans feared and the Jewish leaders feared was over. It was squashed. But something shifted a few days later. His followers were back, and they were more bold than they've ever been, and they were willing to die for their beliefs. What happened? What did they believe?
The Gospels came out.
Well, that man.
And like I was saying with my anti-theist video with 9/11, willing to die for your beliefs really doesn't add any credibility to them.
I mean, people die for all sorts of silly things.
Yep.
Being willing to die for something doesn't. Maybe it means you have nothing else to lose. You got nothing to lose. What the hell? But yeah, I think the difference between Jesus and all these other guys was that Jesus had never actually existed, so putting him to death wouldn't quash anything. Okay, it wouldn't do anything. It's just these damn gospels started coming out, and people started reading them and thinking them that they actually happened. And they were well-written pieces of literature. It's a compelling message, and they were well-written, well-received, and people actually thought that it was true. It was I think it was kind of like a War of the Worlds scenario where, remember, in the 1930s, they started playing a radio program on the radio about an alien invasion, and people actually thought we were being invaded by aliens. Some people even committed suicide rather than being taken by the aliens. There were no aliens. There was no invasion. It was just a story, kind of like the Gospels.
Indeed, indeed. And a $2 super chat sending so much love from the Sinister Porpoise. Did Jesus like Turing machines or lambda calculus? See, that is a hard choice.
I think Jesus was more like a tensor calculus kind of guy.
Yeah, I feel that he may have also been more of a fan of Tim Berners-Lee. So see, these are hard choices that Jesus.
RuPaul.
Exactly. But thank you so very much, Sinister Porpoise. I am a fan of Turing machines more myself. We are using a hypothetical one right now. Or no, we're using a literal one. He had a hypothetical one. Because our computers can do anything that we tell them or we can fit into them. One of those machines. Regios, what is up? Just lurking. And I'm twerking. Since occupied so many streams are. I know. I'll tell you, we're sending love out to my fellow streamers out there. I don't like going live when they are as well. And so we're sending love to them. And we're going back into, we'll all do the similar counter-apologetic jobs, though. So instead of us attacking each other, once again, we don't have a lot of takedown videos, so it's kind of great. Woo, woo! We just have these instead, where we talk about silly things like the overwhelming evidence for the resurrection of Jesus. But James, it's going to happen. I believe in it. And Ultimated, so we can have a formal debate upcoming, like in weeks or a week or whatever we get it set up to. And then if you tag us, then we'll talk about your comment in between what we're trying to do our thing here. But then if you do a super chat, we will also just pause everything and just read it and send love to you. And so multiple ways that you can interact with us, we'll interact with you. And we love all three.
The one who claimed to be God, who was executed by the Romans, he proved his claim by rising from the dead. And I'm going to talk about the evidence. Let's go.
What?
All right, let's jump right into this. Now, I'm going to lay the foundation real quick, and I'm going to talk about the evidence for the resurrection of Jesus. We're heading into Easter week as I'm recording this video, and I think it's a very interesting thing that many people doubt the claim of the resurrection, and we're going to talk about whether or not it's reasonable to even believe in the resurrection of Jesus. Now, there's many different ways and avenues of going down the road of talking about the resurrection of Jesus and determining whether or not it's something that would be valid or not. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to actually go through several facts, very important facts that historians agree to. These are things that not just Christians agree to. Historians, including atheists and agnostics and those who don't agree that the Bible is infallible and people who reject the Bible outright and many other people, there are certain things that they all agree to. At least the vast majority of them agree to. And I think the key is to look through these
in your argument that Jesus resurrected from the dead.
Facts and see what is the best explanation that we have for what explains all of these facts. So I'm going to give the facts, and then at the end of this video, I'm going to address some of the ways people try to explain these facts, and we're going to see if it holds weight. And at the end of this, I will have made the resurrection of Jesus. So let's jump into fact number one. The first fact is that Jesus existed and that he died by Roman crucifixion. Now, this is something that for a long time there was a group of people who would argue that Jesus never even existed, that we just couldn't have.
James, I was going to say, it's about to take pot shots.
Still do.
Historical evidence or enough evidence to prove that Jesus actually even existed. That is not accepted among scholars at all anymore. Now, it's something that used to be accepted. Some people who claim this, they're the mythicists. That's the term for people who think that Jesus was all a myth and the whole thing was a myth. But scholars do not accept that position, and they all unanimously agree.
It doesn't matter what people believe. And this is where you're getting into an argument from authority. So the fallacy of it is just to say, well, they're an authority. They say it, so it must be true. It doesn't matter what people believe. What actually matters is why they believe it. And I think that the experts, they've been very cautious to to not call Jesus a myth unless there would be overwhelming evidence that he wasn't. So they're just going to assume he existed unless there's overwhelming evidence to prove that he didn't. And it's almost impossible to prove a negative, so you can never breach that hurdle. Okay, it's just the fact that so many people, over 1 billion people on Earth, base basically their main belief system around the existence of this one dude. And they're very reluctant to say he wasn't real, okay, unless they have absolute evidence that he wasn't, which is a burden you'll probably never reach. And they don't really care. It's not a hill they want to die on. Who cares? Even if he existed, so what? It doesn't prove he was God. They don't want to die on that hill. But yeah, I don't think he existed. Amy doesn't really care. If he existed, he existed. Fine, whatever. Doesn't prove he was God. Doesn't prove he rose from the dead. Doesn't prove any of the miracle claims.
Yeah, it doesn't mean he turned water into wine.
Yeah, I mean,
that Jesus did indeed exist, and not only did he exist, but he died by Roman crucifixion. As a matter of fact, there's a man named Bart Ehrman. Now, Bart Ehrman is not a Christian. He is an atheist. He doesn't accept the Bible.
And once again, we are using Bart Ehrman as a pillar to then say that he resurrected from the dead, which is not the same thing.
Bible as the word of God. He doesn't believe Jesus is God, and yet he says this. Bart Ehrman argues that the death of Jesus on the cross is one of the most certain facts of history, that the evidence, historical evidence, and he's a biblical scholar, not a Christian, but a scholar, and he says the works and the historical evidence that Jesus existed and died on the cross is a certainty, one of the most certain things that we have in history. He actually offers 11 independent sources to back up that claim, which is more than much of ancient history that we would all agree is historical. Yeah. So the first fact
most of those sources aren't actually talking about Jesus himself. If you actually look at the evidence for Jesus existing, okay, outside of the Gospels, is very scant, very, very scant. And if you actually look at most of the ones they bring up, they're not actually talking about Jesus himself. They're talking about followers of Jesus. Okay, we get it. We know there were lots of people, even the first century, who believed he existed, who worshipped him, who were followers of Jesus. They existed. That doesn't prove there was actually a Jesus. It just proves there were a lot of people that really thought he existed. Yeah. People writing 60, 70, 80 years later who would have never had contact with Jesus, and yet they're being used as evidence of a historical Jesus. Well, no, they were not contemporaneous. What they're evidence of is people believing that he existed.
And died via crucifixion. Now, why is that important to the resurrection? First of all, he would have to die in order to rise from the dead. But also, the death on the cross is very significant for two reasons. Number one, it's detailed like that in Scripture. So even though this may not validate in your mind all of Scripture, it does validate that when it comes to the events of Jesus, the end of Jesus's life, that Scripture is providing some historical detail on the end of Jesus's life. It also is very important because crucifixion specifically was something that the Romans had perfected. And they knew how to assure that someone was dead if they died by crucifixion. And that'll become important later as we start digging into this evidence. So the first fact, Jesus lived and died via Roman crucifixion. The second fact, and all historical scholars agree with this, okay? The second fact.
Once again, building something. This really should be the only thing would be person being a human. If that's what you're trying to prove, then we should be having that conversation, because we don't know if Socrates was a real person. We think that many of the people in these ancient documents are real, but we just use their wisdom. And so they lure Xenu you, and once again, it will get sillier and sillier and sillier with each fact that he tries to present to us. Yeah, more of an opinion. Also, Rubiks, woohoo, grew up with Bert Ehrman's niece and nephew. Pretty sure his brother, Rad, is still a Christian. Not sure, though. That's pretty cool, though.
Is that the disciples, the followers of Jesus, lost all hope. After Jesus died on the cross, they were despondent, they were discouraged, they were bereaved, they lost all
And
hope.
the evidence of this is
everything was
okay.
apart.
Yes, almost the entire rest of his reasons are now all going to be the Bible, and he'll try to pretend that like it's not one source.
The impact of that would be the end of the movement. This is exactly what happened with other messiahs, quote unquote, in the first century. Jesus wasn't the only one who came on the scene and claimed to be a messiah in the first century. We have historical record of many people coming on the scene, claiming to be the messiah, claiming to be the Christ. And when they were killed, the movement ended, because clearly if they died, they weren't the messiah. They didn't accomplish what the messiah was supposed to accomplish. So the second fact that is accepted by nearly all historical scholars on this topic, atheists and agnostics and Jews and everybody who's a historical scholar, they almost all agree that the disciples were despondent and discouraged and lost all hope after Jesus died. The third thing they all agree is that Jesus was indeed buried. His body wasn't just left out to rot. It wasn't eaten by birds. It wasn't.
Another thing we don't know. So now we're going further and further away, because his body could have been just burned.
Again,
his body could have just been thrown away.
Where is he getting this from? The Bible?
The Bible.
Set aside that his body was indeed buried, and most likely buried in a private tomb. Again, this is the historical agreed upon facts. So far, I haven't given a single fact that is miraculous, that you have to agree to the supernatural to agree with these facts. These are just facts that historians all agree on. He was buried, and he was buried most likely in a private tomb, which would fit with the Gospels in the New Testament. When Jesus was buried in the tomb of Joseph
from the Gospels.
Who was a
the Gospels fit with the Gospels. You're right. Yeah.
And this is agreed upon facts by scholars. Fact number 4. It is virtually agreed upon that the tomb that Jesus was buried in was indeed found empty shortly after his death. Now, out of all the facts, that I'm listing here for you in this video, this is the fact that has the least amount of scholarly support.
We are going further down the rabbit hole.
Because even though it's the least amount of scholarly support, 75% of scholars agree with this statement that Jesus' tomb was found empty shortly after his death.
Yeah, so I don't understand why an empty tomb wouldn't mean he came back from the dead. This is another one where it makes no sense. An empty tomb could also be good evidence that they moved the body, that they burned the body, that he had an actual grave.
There never was a body.
Or there never was a body. Yeah. All of those, just as likely as
bring somebody to an empty
rising up from the dead.
You could say, oh, yeah, Jesus' body was in here and now it's gone. But how do you know Jesus? Maybe it was never there.
Maybe.
His death. 75%. That's 3/4 of all scholars agree with this. So even though it's the one with the least amount of support, it still has the overwhelming majority of support of scholars agreeing to this fact. But because it's the one with the least amount of support, I want to real quickly give 6 pieces of information that would indicate that this indeed did happen. Now, I want to point out while I'm going through this video, I do want to give credit. A lot of the information that I am using in this video came from a debate that Mike Winger had with Matt Dillahunty. Now, I've done the research and took all the facts that Mike Winger used in that debate and researched them and found them to be credible and true, which is why I'm using them in this video. If you're interested in that full debate, I'll link that debate down in the description below. But here are the 6 lines of evidence that support the empty tomb. First, there are multiple attestations to this, multiple sources that attest to the fact
in the Bible
that the tomb was found empty. We have this in the 4 Gospels, Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. Now, before you say
decades after
the Bible is not a single source. When we're talking about history and we're talking about historical study, the Gospels and the Bible as a whole is not a single source. It is a collection of 66 different sources, and each of the Gospels is a different source, different source document.
Out of how many hundreds of potential sources, they picked the 66 that were malleable enough to fit the narrative. Okay, what about all the other ones that didn't say that? Well, they didn't make the cut. Why? Because they would contradict it. Okay, so no, The Catholic Church was not going to put something in the Bible that blatantly contradicted their theology and what they believed. No, of course not. But yeah, it's one source because it was one church looking at all the documents and picking out the ones that fit their narrative. So yeah, that's one source. They're just picking they're just picking the writings that they're going to include.
Different information. Now, the point of this video is not to go into the context of the reliability of the Gospels and who wrote the Gospels and whether or not it's anonymous or not, and all that's a different video for a different time. But the point is, they are not a single source. We have this information in all 4 Gospels: Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. That is 4 different sources.
Wow.
And historically, scholars agree that while they may not agree with all of the supernatural claims in the Gospels, they do agree that this was historical and historical information found within the context.
Based on what?
We also see this in pre-Markan accounts, which is Mark was the earliest gospel written, and it was before Mark we see this. There are sermons in the book of Acts, which was written by Luke, that also attest to this. We have the writings of Paul in the New Testament. He also attests to this. Multiple sources attested to the fact that the tomb was empty.
Would Paul have seen the empty tomb? No. Paul was decades. Would Luke have seen the empty? No. Okay, so this is hearsay. This is people telling other people that there was an empty tomb. Yeah, that's not good evidence. I'm sorry, that's among the flimsiest lines of evidence in the world. I mean,
and these all started as oral tradition on their knees, I might say.
Yeah, absolutely. The flimsiest of the flimsiest type of evidence, blatant hearsay over decades of time. Oral tradition.
In Matthew 28, it records that the chief priests and the elders in Jerusalem came and gathered together and came up with a idea or a theory that the disciples must have stolen the body of Jesus, which would attest to the fact that the tomb was empty. Because if the tomb wasn't empty, there's no reason to claim the body was stolen. Now, this is in the Gospel of Matthew being written, but it is a claim from the enemy, from people who disagreed with Christianity, recognizing that the tomb was indeed empty. And before you say,
well, that's just what the Bible says.
Again, historians, actual scholars in the field who are atheists, who don't accept the Bible, agree that this truly is an enemy attestation. That idea that the body was stolen, we have that story recounted past just the Gospels. We see it in the 2nd century writings of Justin Martyr, Tertullian, Celsus. Celsus was actually a critic of Christians. So for him to attest to this is enemy attestation.
What good are sources if they're not corroborating each other regarding the particulars of the events, whether the events being inspired by each other rather than being independent sources? Yeah, it's very clear that these Gospels, the authors were aware of the other Gospels. They contain a lot of the same stories with some certain changes made to them, but it's very clear that the later Gospel authors were well aware of the prior Gospel authors and what they had written. So they made a story that was compatible. It's kind of like the Gospel writers also were aware of the Old Testament. They had the Septuagint, the Greek version of the Old Testament. They knew what it said. So, yeah, they could incorporate things from the Old Testament that Christians today would later point. Oh, look, Jesus fulfilled this prophecy. Well, it's that the people that wrote the stories, they knew about the prophecies. They knew to include certain things that would make it. They're well written. You have to give them credit. It's a compelling story. They're well written. Doesn't mean they're factual, though.
Another thing that shows that it was truly an empty tomb is that there's no competing story at all from the 1st century. We don't have any historical documents or records where there's any competing story to claim that the tomb was never empty, that Jesus' body was still in the tomb.
Is there a competing story that Muhammad did not split the moon in half? What's the competing story on that one, Amy?
Yeah, the competing story is no, it didn't. And so
that would be our competing story for the tomb, right?
Yeah, most people need to breathe air, and most people are not able to crack celestial bodies in half, and yet they wouldn't accept it from Muslims, and yet they seem to, once again, I love the lore of Xenu. Once again, it gets crazier and crazier. till at the very end, he's like, and there you go. Accepting someone came back from the dead. Very logical, actually.
Well, actually, if you go by the story, actually lots of graves opened up, they said. Watch. I remember from when I watched. I don't think he mentions that, though. So most of them, they don't believe that because, oh, well, that's blatantly ridiculous. No, bunch of graves didn't open up. There were not zombies walking around Jerusalem. They hand wave that aside, but this one zombie, they're really sure that he was really real.
It's a special zombie.
Records, no documents, no historians, nobody gives a story that Jesus actually was still in the tomb and the tomb was never empty. So that would indicate that all of the stories that say that the tomb was empty would be more likely true because there's no opposite story even available from the first century. Another key thing about the empty tomb is that the sources we have, and it's not just the Gospels, but mainly the Gospels, but then we have other sources outside of the Gospels that indicate that it was women who first discovered the empty tomb. Now, in the day when...
I love this what's about to be, because it's such a backhanded compliment. The same type of thing that I get from like Muslims who are like, you have no idea how illiterate Muhammad was. Like, he was so illiterate. How could he have possibly written the Quran? You got other people.
Or they would say, like, Islam has more respect for women than any other religion. No, we make them cover themselves because we have so much respect for them.
That's right.
We don't let them drive cars because we have so much respect for them that we would not put that burden on them.
Wouldn't dare put that burden on our feminist women that we have. I'm trying so hard not to say sending love to all the religious fundamentalists. The beekeeper.
Oh.
Yeah. Ninjas. Look, I actually like hijabs because you could show face and you could show makeup and all that. But if you just get rid of the entire everything, why? Well, what's going on? Though, once again, I also find Amish to be equally as cuckoo for Cocoa Puffs because they picked a time period just randomly and decided that electricity was evil and sinful. They still use technology. They use technology up to like the 1600s.
Yeah.
So we think of them as old-timey.
What he's doing is burden shifting. He's giving the biblical account the benefit of the doubt and saying you falsify it.
Oh, he's about to basically say who would trust women back then? Come on.
Okay.
When this actually happened, to say that a woman was the witness to the empty tomb would be embarrassing and wouldn't be good.
Come on,
because
James.
in that day, both Jews and Romans do not accept the testimony of a woman. Women.
But wait a minute, didn't the religion like take off? Didn't it explode and become this huge instant phenomenon? Yet it had women. So apparently, no, it wasn't that. It wasn't like people who are, oh well, you know, this gospel. I mean, I'm okay with it. But when I got to the point where it says that a woman found the tomb, I just closed it, put it down, and walked away. And no, I can't accept that. Is that what happened? No.
And
are generally not considered good witnesses in that time. So this would be embarrassing. And why is this relevant? Because that makes this read like real history. If you're writing a story that you're wanting to promote propaganda or you're wanting to share something that isn't true and you're wanting to make it believable, you're not going to include women as the witnesses, especially not the initial witnesses.
They did, and it worked out for them.
It's going to make people disbelieve your claim.
It
disbelieve
didn't.
your statement. So if you're writing this, you're going and you're creating it, you're fabricating it, you're going to make men to be the initial witnesses of the tomb to give it more credence. Richard Bachman actually has a book on this topic that addresses the witnesses, and it talks about the women witnesses and the significance of that in the gospel stories. So I highly recommend that book. I'll link it down below. Another piece of information we have about the empty tomb, and it's not really about the empty tomb, but it's just about the tomb in general, which is significant to there being an empty tomb, is about Joseph of Arimathea. Joseph of Arimathea seems to be, based on history, a historical person. This is the guy who buried Jesus and the guy who owned the tomb that he put Jesus in. We know that he was a member of the Sanhedrin, which means he was very well known at that time.
And yeah, once again, It's like, who would trust women?
Here we go. So once again, they're not talking about evidence. They're talking about evidence of somebody else in the story being real. Okay. All right. Pontius Pilate was real. There are real people that the writers knew of, but they did get a lot of the details wrong, like that whole thing with the census that they flubbed. That didn't really pan out. But yeah, some of the names, yeah, they might have remembered who was the governor at one time, or who was a dude on the Sanhedrin that they remember, but the details they tended to not so good.
So embarrassing. So embarrassing. So it's right. It's true, right, guys? Like, yeah. No.
It's multiply attested to in multiple
What's up,
sources.
immutable?
He's also a local to the area of Jerusalem.
Ness.
Arimathea was about 4 to 5 miles northwest of Jerusalem. The reason that's significant is that he was well known and that he was from the area.
Yeah, he was well known. They would have known to include him.
Exactly. He was at all the clubs.
Of Arimathea confirmed that it was his tomb and went to his tomb with him, and he could have shown them that the tomb was not empty. So the fact that it includes Joseph of Arimathea in the story shows that at the time this was written, it was testable. They could have confirmed. It's also embarrassing that a Sanhedrin member helped bury Jesus when all the disciples had ran off and had abandoned Jesus. That's something that they put in the story that, again, would have been embarrassing.
Oh, no, the Bible, they love their redemption, and like the Christians, they eat this shit up, the coming back to Jesus, like, oh, they lost faith, and then they got their faith back when they saw Jesus again. Give me a fucking break. The Christians eat this shit up. These prodigal son come back to Jesus stories, they love it.
If you're faking this whole thing and writing it all out fake, and it's all fake, you wouldn't have included that detail.
Yeah.
And
Well,
finally,
they
to
did.
the biblical story and the sources with the empty tomb, we see that archaeology confirms that this type of tomb.
Oh, the irony of a creationist using archaeology.
Was prominent in the area. There are 3 kinds of tombs in the time of Jesus according to archaeology. And Jesus' tomb, the way it's described in the Gospels, fits one of those tombs. In particular, it was the most expensive kind, which was owned by people like members of the Sanhedrin, like Joseph of Arimathea. This is significant because if, for some reason, it claims to have this specific type of tomb in the Gospels, and then all of the archaeology turns up and no tombs like that exist in Israel from that time, it would indicate that the story was fabricated. But it wasn't. Those details, those facts, even down to the type of tomb, show that this indeed was a historical accurate account. Now,
so the authors of the gospel, they knew what tombs look like. Okay, wow. Okay, so they had seen a tomb and they could accurately describe a tomb in the gospel. Therefore, this is the tomb Jesus was in, right? I mean, look, Amy, he described a tomb, and look, we found a tomb that kind of matches that description. Okay, he knew what tombs
Basically
look
a
like.
miracle.
Congratulations.
That they were indeed eyewitnesses, or at least had knowledge of what was happening. Because if this was written, like some people claim this was written decades and decades later in a completely different area of the world, they wouldn't have known what type of tombs are there in Jerusalem. They wouldn't have had all the details. When you're writing something decades and even centuries after the fact, and you write that, you're not going to have those specific details if you're not from that area. This is before Google. This is before the internet. You couldn't get on the internet and look up these details. If you didn't live in the area, you would not have these details. Jody Magnus, who works at the same college as Bar Ehrman and is an expert on Jewish burial practices, said this: the Gospels accounts describing Jesus' removal from the cross and burial accord well with archaeological evidence and Jewish law.
Yeah,
so being an
they
expert,
were written by
Jody knows,
Jews.
and
The
you look at the
people who wrote
information
the
and it
stories
matches
were
up.
Jewish. Obviously.
Welcome, Heisenberg. Most of us probably agree with Shani on that one, but we're actually looking for lots of people who disagree with us. That's right. So welcome on board.
Jesus
very, very well. So that's 6 good lines of evidence that indicate that the tomb was indeed an empty tomb. And we have not one single shred of evidence along any of those lines to indicate that the tomb was never empty. So let's get back to our key facts that all scholars agree on, right? So again, 75% of scholars agree with the empty tomb, and that is the least amount of agreement that we have on any of these points. The next point is that the disciples had individual and group experiences that they believed were actual appearances of Jesus. We have accounts in Scripture of 2 people seeing Jesus, 1 person seeing Jesus, 11 people, the disciples as a group, seeing Jesus, and even an account of 500 people at once seeing Jesus after he died and rose again.
In fact, he started doing birthday parties. Really surprising.
Did Did he make the balloons? Did he, make the funny balloon animals?
He did.
There you go.
He made all of the water into grape juice, and then for the adults, he's like, "All right, I'll keep on doing my wine trick. Everyone loves the greatest hits." Exactly. Everybody's happy, James.
Yeah. This is agreed upon by scholars that these people actually had these experiences that they believed was the risen Jesus. Now, atheist scholars and agnostic scholars and scholars who don't agree with the Bible won't say that they confirm and believe that this was truly the risen Jesus, but they do affirm that these disciples and these people who saw Jesus had experiences that they believed were seeing the risen Jesus.
And how would they know that?
15, we have a very interesting thing from Paul. In 1 Corinthians 15, verse 3, it says this: "For I pass on to you as most important what I also received, that Christ died for our sins according to the scriptures, that he was buried, he was raised on the third day according to the scriptures, that he appeared to Cephas, then to the 12, then he appeared to over 500 brothers and sisters at one time. Most of them are still alive, but some have fallen asleep. Then he appeared to James, then to all the apostles. Last of all, as to one born at the wrong time, he also appeared to me." Now, what Paul just quoted, where he talks about Jesus being crucified, and then he talks about him being raised.
He says according to the scriptures, because he didn't actually see any of those things.
I was going to say, according to a guy we're pretty sure didn't actually see Jesus. It was a hallucination or something, because people don't seem to come back from the dead. You're now using a guy who basically wrote giant portions of the New Testament as evidence. Once again, it's Bible on top of Bible on top of Bible.
I mean, of course, our modern day Messiah, apparently, who died, and would you believe it, Amy? He came back from the dead. Every few months, there's another sighting of Elvis. I mean, he's been dead since the 1970s, yet people keep seeing him. They have actual
keeps on coming back from the dead.
Encounters with Elvis Presley. I mean, what more evidence do we need?
Indeed. We need more cats.
Raised on the third day, and all of this stuff. The way Paul writes this in textual form in the Greek is actually in the form of a creedal statement. It's like an actual doctrinal statement of the church, a position of the church. This isn't Paul just writing. He's quoting what he received, which is this doctrinal creed or creedal statement in 1 Corinthians 15. Now, 1 Corinthians was one of the earliest writings that Paul had. 1 Corinthians 15 specifically, one of the earliest writings of Paul. And in it's not the earliest, but it's one of the earliest. And in this early writing of Paul, he quotes a creed that has already taken the form of a creedal doctrinal statement of the church that has been around predating his letters, something that he had received and that he had already taught to the church of Corinth when he was with them before he wrote this letter. Now, here's the kicker. Most scholars agree, and I mean most, atheists, agnostic, scholars who aren't Christians, they agree that this creedal statement in this passage that I just read in 1 Corinthians 15 not only predates Paul, but it was the earliest creedal statement that we had record of and dates to just a couple of years after the crucifixion. Gerd Ludman, which I'm probably butchering that name, who is an atheist New Testament professor, says this: "The elements in this tradition," that Paul quotes in 1 Corinthians 15, "are to be dated to the first 2 years after the crucifixion of Jesus, not later than 3 years. The formation of the appearance traditions mentioned in 1 Corinthians 15, 3-8, falls into the time between 30 and 33 CE, which would be just a year or two after Jesus was killed." So they had just a year or two after Jesus was killed. The church had already formulated a creed.
Good thing he didn't come back from the dead and got murdered and kind of stayed 6 feet under. Trying to think of other ways that I can say didn't resurrect.
That acknowledged that Jesus had made all these appearances to all these different people. Keep that in mind as we go forward. There are other early accounts other than the Gospels and other than what's in the Bible that also
people saying he made these appearances.
You have Clement of Rome.
Not hearing from the actual people who did, though.
And once again, he makes kind of like Bible-like statements that are like, if you don't believe me, that's proof that you should believe me. And it's like,
You need that. You just need that faith, Amy. You need God. God wants you to have faith. He's not going to just show you. He's not going to just part the Red Sea like he did for your space lizard ancestors right in front of their. He's not going to do that for you. You just have to have faith.
Gotta believe it in your heart.
Yeah.
For example, These are examples of early writings that have this attestation as well. Garrett Lou Diamond, who is an atheist, and he's actually one of the lead critics of the resurrection,
I
says
always
this.
love when they like quote a scholar. They're always like, and he's an atheist. And they're a real physicist, as opposed to whatever we got going on.
May be taken as historically certain that Peter and the disciples had experiences after Jesus' death in which Jesus appeared to them as the risen Christ. Now, he's not saying that he believes Jesus actually appeared to them. He's saying that it is certain, historically speaking, that they did have experiences that they believed.
They're saying they took
And
tabs of LSD.
how would we know that? How would we know that they actually had an experience or they just made it up? I mean, honestly, how would you know? We going to bring Peter Cephas back from the dead and hook him up to a lie detector machine?
Yes.
Did you really have this encounter with Jesus, or were you eating some magic mushrooms? What was going on when you claimed you had this encounter? I mean, even Paul, I mean, I think most people believe he saw something, but do we know? Do we know what was going through his mind? No.
Yeah, we know that people don't come back from the dead, though, especially after 3 days of rotting. Kind of those little things.
Or is Jesus appearing to them in resurrected form? Mike Lykolnis says this. This conclusion about the appearances is granted by a nearly unanimous consensus of modern scholars and may therefore be added to our historical bedrock. That it is so historically agreed upon amongst all scholars of all backgrounds, all worldviews, that they had some kind of experience that they believed was the risen Jesus. So let's look at our next agreed upon fact. Are we having fun yet?
Yes.
Uh-huh.
Due to these experiences that are agreed upon that these disciples had, the disciples' lives were transformed and they were willing to die for what they believed. You see, remember we talked about one of the agreed upon facts.
Once again, not a fact. Really just proof that people will die for stupid shit.
The people in the People's Temple in Guyana, they were willing to die for Jim Jones when he said to drink the Kool-Aid. They drank it. They died.
In fact, James, have you ever heard of this concept called war? It is like this really subtle thing where many dumb wars have kind of, taken place throughout history.
It is true. Yeah. People transforming their lives, people being willing to die.
Not proof that you're right.
Not proof that it's right.
Says that when Jesus died, the disciples were despondent, discouraged. They fled. They weren't wanting to continue the movement. They felt discouraged. They felt like everything failed.
They were moping around. They needed to cheer themselves up. They were all sad, Amy. Their BFF was gone.
Days later, they're bold. Their life seems different. They're no longer discouraged. They're willing to die for a belief that Jesus was alive again, that he had rose again. That's crazy. We have the persecution of the early church through multiple sources. Nobody disagrees, on a scholarly level anyways, disagrees that persecution of the early church happened. We have extremely strong historical evidence of the deaths.
We know they were persecuted.
James and Paul.
Doesn't mean they were all right.
Mostly quoting each other, which is really cool.
People throughout history have been persecuted. The Jews in the 1930s and 40s were persecuted heavily. Are you saying they were right? Is Judaism now correct because they were persecuted? People are being persecuted in China.
Nowhere real. It does.
People in North Korea are being persecuted. I mean, people are being persecuted all over.
Martyred for the faith. They died for this belief that Jesus was returning, that Jesus had rose again. And the key with that is that being eyewitnesses to these events, they were in the position to know if these things were true or not. They weren't claiming someone else saw Jesus. They were claiming that they saw Jesus. And if they were lying, if it wasn't true.
I saw Jesus and I got his autograph. He did it with, just pointing at it. It's a great miracle.
But what about people centuries later in the Diocletian persecutions when Christians were killed? They never saw Jesus. They never had any encounters with him. They were just Christians, more or less like you today are a Christian. All they have is faith. And yet a lot of them were willing to die to refuse to recant their faith. Look at the history of Europe, the Protestants and Catholics killing each other for their different beliefs about Christianity. I mean, you would have to be pretty secure in your faith, Amy, to say, if you don't recant your faith, we're going to tie you up to a stake and burn you. But if you recant, we won't. And you say, well, no, I can't recant. I guess you're just going to have to burn me alive. That would take some pretty damn strong conviction in your faith to do that. And they did.
Sending love to Sinister. Poor Best saying trans people are being persecuted as we speak. Therefore, trans people are right. Here we go.
Very rare that someone would be willing to die for a lie. Now, it's true that it does happen. There are some people through history who
if it does like the fact that he's even ceding that much ground means your point is worthless.
Yeah, he's just said it happens. Well, okay.
I like both of these comments.
There you go, Guitar Dog. Samurai committing suicide on the battlefield for honor. Just for honor.
we know died for a lie. But most of the time, that's extremely rare. And in those instances when it did, it wasn't. It was to make a name for themselves and not for.
Yeah, like with Christianity. He called himself, or at least he's referred to as rabbi. He was a religious leader.
Make a name for themselves. Don't Christians revere the martyrs? Those who died for the faith. Those are people who Christians look up to. So I'm not saying that they didn't have
Catholics make them saints.
Bravery, right? Justin Martyr. Yeah, they revere these Christians who had the faith to be willing to die for what they believe. And yeah, that takes an immense amount of courage and fortitude, and we can all admit that. It doesn't mean what they believed is right, though.
Or a belief that they were saying, don't care about us, acknowledge God, acknowledge a different source than themselves. Paul Fredrickson, who's not a Christian, asserts that the disciples' conviction that they'd seen the risen Christ is part of historical bedrock fact known past doubting. They really weren't lying. They believed this. They really believed.
How do we know that?
Live. It is.
Ooh, James Wolfe asked a good question. But are people likely to die for something they know is not true? That is interesting. I'm sure there are people out there that can utilize things. I know we get some people that will say that we should believe in religion even if we know it's not true. I would say that it's probably more likely if you know something. The problem that we run into, which is the crux, is what does it feel like to be wrong when you think that you're right, and it feels exactly the same as when you are right. And so, yeah, what often there also may not be dying for a lie, they're dying for being wrong.
Well,
could be a lie, could be wrong.
I think there were very few people who were killed who actually would have been one of those witnesses that knew it was a lie, right? So, yeah, they might have believed. It doesn't mean their belief is right. So, yeah, if you had said you saw him raised from the dead, but you really didn't, and they want you to recant, yeah, you probably would at that point. But again, that's a small minority of those who he's talking about, the martyrs.
It's also agreed upon amongst scholars that apostolic proclamation of the resurrection began very early on when the church was in its infancy. It's something that started early in the very beginning. It's not something that developed
go figure.
Years later as legend, but something that developed very quickly and very early.
A church built around Jesus Christ believed in the resurrection. Go figure. I mean, okay, yeah, no shit.
And except for the first source that he is basically using to say that Jesus may have existed, all the others are just the Bible.
It is also agreed upon by scholars that the preaching of the disciples about the resurrection of Jesus happened in Jerusalem. These are well accepted by scholars. It's not controversial at all. These are things the scholars believe. Historians actually agree to these things, even if they're atheists or don't believe in God or don't believe in Jesus or don't believe that Jesus is God. And why is it the fact that it's early and happened in Jerusalem? Why do these two things matter? Because it rules out the idea of legendary development later. It rules out the idea that it was simply a lie. Stuff that these disciples were claiming at the time that they were claiming them in the place they were claiming them. The things that
we don't know what they were
all the people who lived right there in Jerusalem lived there. They could go to the tomb. They could go to the temple. They could talk to the chief priest. They could talk to the Roman soldiers. They could confirm all of these details.
No, they couldn't. No, they couldn't.
The next thing that the scholars agree on is that the gospel message, the preaching of the disciples.
We're on fact 9, and still no facts. That's kind of funny.
I mean, he's really and this is why I like this video. Is it just you just see how to what lengths they are really just grasping for straws here. They really don't have anything, but it's kind of like a fake it till you make it. Bullshitting with a straight face. It's like you don't have anything, but can you make it look like you believe you have a lot? Put on that poker face.
Poker face.
Centered on the death and resurrection of Jesus. This hurts the legendary theory that it became legend and was added later. Tacitus tells us that when Jesus was crucified, it shut down the movement. And then it suddenly exploded shortly thereafter and spread throughout the whole world. And he's a non-Christian historian. This is important because some people think that the church started.
He would have known in 3 days it shut down and then picked right back up. And he was that close to the pulse of Judaism and early Christianity that he would have known that. Wow.
Church as legendary later, and it's the exact opposite. It was the belief in the resurrection that started the church. If they did not believe the resurrection had actually occurred, their boldness to go and wait in the upper room and then to start the church and to be preaching and to do all the things they did, that boldness would be gone. It wouldn't be there. So the church would have never even started. Now, another key thing about the resurrection that all scholars agree on is that Jesus appeared to perform miracles. Now, some scholars will say he just appeared to. They don't believe he actually did, but he appeared to. And he considered himself to be God's eschatological agent. As far as eschatological agent, that simply means he just thought he was fulfilling.
That means he had an agent. He was trying to do arenas.
Prophecy. Jesus believed himself to be fulfilling prophecy, and all scholars, all historical scholars, agree to this fact. The reason this is significant is because if Jesus did rise from the dead, and he was saying that he was sent from God, he predicted his own death and predicted that he would rise again, and then he did and said it was by the power of God, this gives credit to the fact that there is a God who did this. Because why? Because the very guy who it actually happened to, who did raise from the dead, is attesting to the fact through the power of the miracle of the resurrection that God is the one who did it. There's 2 more things I want to look at right here
that is such a clusterfuck. I cannot even know say anything.
The next one is that James, the brother of Jesus, was a skeptic before Jesus died. He didn't agree or believe that Jesus was the Son of God. He didn't believe Jesus.
I also learned that, the brother of Jesus may have been his cousin or a relative or just his super bestest friend.
It's not clear.
This was the Messiah. But immediately after the resurrection of Jesus, he all of a sudden agrees and believes on Jesus and became a Christian. Gary Habermas, who is an expert in the historical Jesus and the events of the resurrection, says that the majority of critical scholars that have written on the subject of James, the brother of Jesus, grant the conversion of James as a result of what he perceived was a post-resurrection of Jesus. So they acknowledge that something happened where James believed he encountered Jesus after the resurrection, and his life changed. He went from being a skeptic who didn't accept Jesus to believing on Jesus and becoming a Christian, becoming an evangelist, and preaching and teaching. And this group that agrees with this about James is not made up of just Christians. It's made up of atheists, agnostics, cynics, revisionists, moderates.
No,
made up of people of all
mostly
backgrounds.
just Christians.
Mostly Christians.
The other thing that is fully agreed to by scholars is that within a few years of Jesus' death, Saul, who
immutable,
persecuted
the literary device,
them and tried to kill them, became a Christian due to an experience that he believed.
It's like Amy's mythic structure thing. There always has to be some some doubter, somebody who isn't quite sure, who gets won over. It's a great literary device. It's almost an essential component of a good story. And James fulfills that role. He's the guy he's not quite sure, but then he comes around and realizes that
Around the mountain?
yes.
It was an appearance of the risen Jesus. We know this from Paul's own testimony, and we know that he suffered greatly because of that belief, that he was willing to die for it. None of the claims that all the scholars agree on are miraculous claims. They are all well evidenced, and they're all agreed on by a majority of the scholars, including
And they all come from the Bible.
scholars who don't believe in
Except for
Christianity.
one.
So the question we're left
Even
with
that's
is
still
what
really
best
most of the
explains
Bible.
these facts? What best explains all of this? And ultimately, the best
People
explanation
believe in
we
the
have
gospel.
of this is the resurrection. Now, people have tried to give
No.
other explanations. So I'm hitting just a couple of those.
Now, we're at minute 28 of 33. We're about to be at the end of the video. And so, James, isn't it nice that he's now going to talk about the resurrection of Jesus? It's fantastic.
For example, conspiracy, the explanation of it being a conspiracy. This breaks the idea that history shows that, and historians agree, that the disciples were sincere. It doesn't explain how they went from having no hope and losing all hope to all of a sudden preaching the gospel and being willing to die. It doesn't explain the Jerusalem factor, how they were in Jerusalem preaching and these things were able to be tested. It doesn't explain James and Paul being saved. Did they just jump into the conspiracy because they wanted to be a part of some kind of conspiracy? Like, it doesn't explain them being saved and actually believing they encountered the risen Jesus. It doesn't explain the appearances. It doesn't explain them being willing to die.
The Bible just said it, and so that explains it?
Yeah, I don't know why this is
hard.
so hard. People got the gospel started being distributed. People read them and they believed them. They thought it was real. That's all that they need. Doesn't have to actually be real for them to think it's real based on a story.
For their beliefs, if it's just a fake conspiracy, a lie that they've made up, it doesn't explain why they would be willing to die for that lie. Another theory that people have thrown around is the hallucination theory. This doesn't explain anything either. For example, first of all, Jesus didn't just appear to one person. He appeared to groups, and group hallucinations are not something that actually happens. Now, there's been a few claims of group hallucinations, but no agreed upon hallucinations. So everybody in the group was hallucinating, saw similar things, but not the exact same thing. And there's no evidence that group hallucinations actually happen with the accuracy that these attestations have. It doesn't explain the empty tomb. It doesn't explain the fact that they were in Jerusalem and these things could be tested.
It doesn't explain all these other things that we don't have actually good evidence for.
Records of them.
The Bible just says it.
Their dead loved ones, people that have died that they love and they hallucinate and see their dead loved ones. Most often, almost
Amy,
always,
we
the person
have
doesn't think they're believing that.
You know, I forgot because we didn't normally. I do this, but what do you think about the beard, the facial hair with this guy? You haven't gotten your because of Reservoir Gore made a comment about his eyebrows.
Oh, well, the eyebrows definitely need to be waxed or trimmed, but the beard needs to be groomed. It's not terrible. It is in an accurate, decent length.
It's decent.
You just need like little bit of maintenance at the bottom here, but not terrible. Reservoir Gore is right. Really, I mean, it's the eyebrows that we really need to take care of on hair maintenance. Yeah. So, you know, the beard, we're doing okay with. Just don't let it get any longer here.
It's approaching the limit.
It is approaching the limit. Yes, you really have to. It's hard to pull like a long, like
for it to get much longer.
Jason. You have to be like a Jason Momoa to like pull like the long beard off.
Much longer than that, yeah. He just doesn't have that.
But okay, we're moving into the end of the overwhelming evidence. Resurrection of Jesus.
The person raised from the dead physically. Most of the time, the hallucination they think they're seeing a ghost or an apparition or something like that, and not actually seeing a physical person where they can actually physically touch them and know that they're physically raised from the dead. That's not how hallucinations generally work. What about legend?
Is it really?
Is the idea that
you're an expert on hallucinations?
Legend over time. This is actually one that's growing in popularity online. But basically, this just denies all the history. It's a lazy and irresponsible solution in the terms of Mike Winger. And I agree with him. I think it's lazy to just assume that it's legend. Oh, I can't explain all these facts. I'm just going to say, oh, it's just legend and just throw it out there.
But it makes more sense that it's a legend.
It certainly does make more sense that it's a legend. That the Gospels just started getting distributed. People read them, they liked them, and they believed it was true.
No evidence that it was actual legendary development. And it doesn't account for the fact that 1 Corinthians 15, that early passage where within 1 to 2 years after Jesus was crucified, we
I would
already
need to
have
see some
in creedal
scholarship on
doctrinal
that.
form all of this information that was spread
We're
across.
gonna need to see the receipts, actually.
But even still, once again, that is evidence of people that believed. It's always not evidence of actual. It's evidence of people that believed in Jesus, not actual evidence of Jesus. It's yes, we know. Yes, there were people who believed in Jesus. They really thought he was real. They really thought he rose from the dead. We know that. That is not evidence of an actual Jesus rising from the dead.
The church and preached across the church in just 1 or 2 years. That's not enough time for legend to develop. There's another theory, it's swoon theory. This one doesn't work, and it's not really held to by any scholar or anybody at all. This is the idea that Jesus suffered severe physical trauma on the cross, but didn't actually die.
I love this because this is to be a little bit on the nose. This is the nail in the coffin because he's like, no, it definitely had to break the laws of physics.
To the point of death, almost dying, and then they took him off the cross, put him in the grave, and in the coolness of the grave, as he laid there, he slowly got better until 3 days later he was able to get up and leave. This
because
is
that did happen sometimes.
Because that is possible.
Not all the time. But
I also get apologetics from Christians who are like, well, haven't there been bodies that we put in the morgue and that it turns out that they were actually alive and just passed out? And this guy's like, no, he was definitely dead.
Well, if you know, back before the advent of modern medicine, really, a lot of times they used to, they would put people in their coffins, in their tombs. They would actually have a little string going down there connected to a bell above ground. So if the person woke up in the coffin, they could pull on the string and somebody would know that they were alive down there. Because it did happen. Not all the time, not like it wasn't, universal or happen all the time, but it did happen. People were worried about it because they did find there were bodies that were exhumed from coffins, and you could tell that the person had woke up because they were they were trying to escape from the coffin. Obviously, they couldn't. It was sealed and they were underground, but they obviously tried. So.
And soldiers were good at crucifixion. They knew what to do to make sure someone was dead. And the Roman soldier pierced Jesus in the side, and blood and water flowed out, and that blood and water confirms that he was indeed dead. It's highly unlikely that after all of that, Jesus could have survived that ordeal, let alone be revived enough within 3 days of laying there with no medical attention, no help, laying in a dark tomb, that he would have been able to revive himself enough to leave the tomb, to roll the stone away, to leave the tomb, and to go and be traveling and showing up to all the disciples. And it doesn't account for the fact that the tomb was sealed and Roman guards were standing guard outside of the tomb, which would make it highly unlikely that Jesus would have escaped or been rescued. So none of these theories work. None of them have gained support among scholars. Scholars who don't believe in Christianity, don't believe in the resurrection of Jesus.
The tombs of executed criminals, I mean, were they like, did they guard them all, I guess? Because the Romans were executing quite a lot of people for almost anything. They have guards stationed at every burial site. Just asking. I don't know.
For a friend.
Yeah.
Acknowledge all of these facts, but when you actually address it with people who don't accept the resurrection and their scholars, what they do is they don't offer these opposing viewpoints. They simply say, here are the facts, and I don't know how to explain them. And that's where they end up. I don't know how to explain the facts. So they'll agree to the facts, but they won't tell you what it means. So all of these facts, the best explanation is the resurrection. The best explanation for all of these facts cumulative together is the resurrection. But this is the case for the resurrection of Jesus.
Oh.
Now, here's the key. If the resurrection of Jesus is...
You mean you end up with where you started from. You started with the fact that the resurrection is true, and that's where you ended up. Congratulations.
There you go.
Yeah.
James, wow. The Bible proves the Bible is true. You think about it.
So we assume it's true to begin with, and then we look at everything under that lens, and we force everything to fit that narrative, and then lo and behold, hey, it fits. We made it work.
True. And he claimed to be God. And that would mean he is God and has the power to raise himself from the dead 3 days after he died. That means that his words should be taken seriously and we should submit to him. Because he's God. Hope this helped you. Go back, watch this again if you need to make sure you get all these points.
I think we got it all.
If you're a Christian watching this, you know how to defend the.
And I love it. They're, like I said, they're trying to figure out how to
resurrection and to be able to say that scholars all agree on this and you don't have to feel weird about believing in something that sounds crazy like the resurrection of the dead. I hope you enjoyed.
That's my favorite part. Just one more.
To feel weird about believing in something that sounds crazy like the resurrection of the dead. I hope you.
What more can you say, James? It sounds crazy, doesn't it? Well, ladies and gentlemen, there might be a reason for that.
There you go.
And all right, with that, we just finished
crazy.
up the opposing viewpoint of the overwhelming evidence for resurrection of Jesus from the Word Room. And with that, we're about to be moving into the open mic where those that disagree with us can tell us why we're so wrong. Do-do-do. What's up, Kathy? What's up, everyone? Everyone's still hanging with us, sending love to Tim and Shani and Reservoir Board, Immutable, and Guitar Dog. Woohoo!
Thank you, Reservoir.
Thank you so very much.
So we'll get
What's
that.
up, Trusty
I'll
Ape?
confer with you, and we'll get something set up with Ultimated.
Indeed. I always think it's funny when he wants to have any sort of debate with us just because it is a man who claims that he had sex with God, but ultimated, I love you, and we'll debate whatever you'd like. The ontology of the Judeo-Christian God. But if you would like to come join us, we are Skeptic and Ranting on the overwhelming evidence for the resurrection of Jesus. Boom. Boom. And we'll stick around for as long as it takes to get a friend or so on, or we will wrap up because I'm going to Randolph Richardson's stream at 11 today, technically.
I'm working in the morning, so.
Woohoo!
Yeah. Yeah, it's been a difficult week trying to juggle the scheduling, but hopefully next week we'll get back to a more regular schedule of
exactly
content.
We aim for about 2 to 3 streams a week, and so I apologize to everyone out there the past few days where I was getting adjusted to 2 jobs, but once again, both of these jobs are pretty awesome. Like they have some of the both more interesting stories out of them, but like of a day, if like the 1/5 is like interesting stories, the 4/5 is just like you actually hopefully making a difference. I really like my web design class. I'm falling in love with it. I'm falling in love with rubric making. I used to talk about how the rubric class was the one that made me sweat while I was in school, and yet I'm so glad I took it because having a rubric
aficionado.
Can I tell you, James? It's such a subtle thing until it's so awkward, or it was so awkward for me to start grading because I'm so nice, and I came into, once again, it sounds like I'm patting myself on the back, but that's not always a good thing. There's sometimes when you need to not be nice. And so having a rubric makes it so that I can go, you did this, you didn't do this, but you did this. And so your grade is exactly that. It wasn't just like, what was I feeling that day, or do I like the student or not? It is boom, 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 boom.
Because at the end of the day, if they're not learning the content, I mean, are you doing them a favor by just passing them if they don't actually know, if they're not actually learning it?
Indeed. And so, no same person goes into teaching. That's right, Sinister. Who would start teaching? Can I imagine someone going to even multiple schools, having to fill in the blank and actually round up students and try to get a better education? Sending so much love out there. So are you able to teach the content? Well, that's the other thing. Oh, and in a second, we'll get Kathy in. We'll open up the open mic. Woo-hoo! James Wolfe says, I've got 2 jobs now. 2. No way in the world I could show the girl. Oh, sending so much love. It's been an adjustment, but like I said, it is one of those things where I've spent a lot of time. This is where I wanted to do a lot of this stuff. And so instead of arguing in Discord, you do a little bit less of that, and you do discussion posts in a class. Or as I've been learning, I had to do a whole bunch of, at the other position, whole bunch of range of jobs. Like I told my mother, this will be the last thing I say. I'm like, I think you've been waiting years for me to tell you this. Is just because you tell a child or a student to do something, and they even say that they're going to do it, that has almost no bearing sometimes on whether they're actually going to do it. You're like, don't use the glue gun. You're going to burn yourself. And they're like, okay, we won't do it. And then they try and grab it. You're like, no. And then all of a sudden, you now have the glue gun behind you so that you can supervise the.
Next thing you know, the kid is sitting there with his hand glued to his penis.
Well, like, they all say
from American Pie.
But they all makes love to a pie. But they all say the same thing, which is like, I would never hurt myself. And then, yes, then you end up, you can't trust any kids. You can't trust anyone. Anyway, we're going to bring in Kathy.
I mean, do you realize, like, the amount of warning label stuff has on them? You know, like, we have to tell you that your hot coffee is hot. Okay? I know. You know, everything has multiple disclaimers and warning labels. Yeah, you really can't assume anything.
You can't do. I would say, generally speaking, the only punishments are that you have to listen to "We Don't Need No Education" on loop. Though I will say, I went to a school where they played Rick Ashley at the very beginning. That was kind of cool. Like, never gonna give you. I was listening through the loudspeakers, and I'm like, it's become cool again. There you go, because of the meme.
We'll make you listen to Bruno Mars.
I hear the cat. The cat's okay. Anyway, let's bring Kathy in.
Which is a human rights violation, by the way.
Kathy's like, listen, we're going to need to have an English class on what's going on here. It's true. That telltale sign the school system wasn't working. Pay your teachers more money, ladies and gentlemen. These strangers care about you. That's not even me.
If we evolved from monkeys, why are there still monkeys?
Oh, Jesus.
Yeah.
Indeed. If there's still... if we're Americans, wow, they're still Europeans. Or insert whatever country.
It doesn't go to just science, too. It goes to history. Like, are we really sure he was the bad guy? I'm pretty sure he was bad.
Oh my goodness. Yes.
Yeah.
If you have Alex Jones looking sane, you're in bad.
I'm pretty sure he was bad. Yeah.
He's like, you're just saying that because you're shocking, but it's okay. We've had, was it 21 Jump Street? The diplomat Jonah Hill was actually able to get us. Apparently, actually, it's probably the diplomat Valium, if I must say so. But whatever. Things happen. Let's get Kathy on here. We're going into the open mic. As we are Skeptic and Ranting. I am looking for the. What's up, Kathy? Welcome to Skeptic and Ranting. We are talking about the overwhelming evidence for the resurrection of Jesus, and welcome on board.
Hey, what's up, guys? You mentioned paying teachers like the money they should be paid. I don't know if you heard Joe Rogan say that, teachers should be paid like Hollywood stars, and Hollywood stars should be paid like teachers. And we should have Oscar awards for the best teacher of the year,
I wish. Did you? I think there was a Key and Peele skit where that was like that. I wish it was like that.
It probably was inspired from that.
I mean, it's never going to happen because just the sheer number of teachers versus the sheer number of, I mean, it's a nice idea, but.
Well, I mean, it's never going to happen because I don't think the goal of our culture, government, whatever you want to call it, the people who are truly in control, man, they don't want you to be truly educated. Terrence McKenna once said, like, all these universities and prestigious schools nowadays are like gigantic trade schools, like where you learn a particular skill and then you become a cog in the machine. You just, you become another cog in the machine, and you only gain their benefit, so on and so forth. I don't know if you would agree to that, but it makes sense to me.
I'm sympathetic to some, but on the other side, I'm also very sympathetic to academia. I can't help it. I've had really good experiences on, at least now looking back through K through 12, I realized what they were doing through me. And my university was a really good experience. But I think you have to be careful because you need to make sure that whatever you're going into, you are able to make a living out of.
Sure.
And I used to make fun of, we don't make fun of basket weaving anymore because we've learned that basket. We used to, you know what I mean though, is basket weaving is an actual skill, and the creationists that we come across, they don't have any actual skills.
Yeah.
At least with basket weaving, you can come away with something to put stuff in.
Basket.
Yeah, nice basket.
I don't know what your opinion is of Andrew Tate, Amy, but he did kind of put it this way. He said, even if you went to a prestigious university like Cambridge or, something like that, you got multiple doctorates degree, you got the 6-figure income and so on and so forth, you still wouldn't be able to afford at least one of his cars. And what the point he was trying to make is that you don't make money by going and getting an education. There's obviously other means
and the way I parse out Andrew Tate is he says something that is rational and then something insane. And so it reminds me of a similar thing to a degree of Jordan Peterson, where if you cut out half of what he says, sometimes it will sound sane, but that is if you cut out 50%, the other part
sounds like word salad or something. I've heard that criticism too. I mean, I'm having studied Jung and so forth. I don't really hear Jordan Peterson as word salad. It doesn't register for me like that. But I can see how atheists might criticize it like that.
It depends. Well, when he's talking about Jung, and when he's talking about mythic structure, that's all good. When he can't define truth, when he says statements like you don't act like you're an atheist and stuff like that. It does just sound like the stereotypical stuff that we get, from fundies. So it's it's half and half.
Well, I mean, look, there's lots of YouTubes. You can look on YouTube channels that pull in 6 figures a year, telling people how to make money. And actually, their secret, the real secret, how they make money is by putting out videos telling other people how to make money. They don't make money actually doing what's in their videos. They make money by telling other people, so they get the views and they get watch time and whatnot. It's
yeah, you're talking about like the passive income. Like they,
Right.
put up these videos and they don't have to do anything for it. They just have to wait for the people to view them and the money comes in.
But they don't actually like they put videos about like, oh, how to make money in the real estate market, but they're not actually in the real estate market making money. They're making money by putting out videos telling other people how supposedly to make money in the real estate market. See what I mean? Like they're selling you the idea that there's money to be made.
Yeah, I mean, even Tate has the same paradigm. He calls it Hustler's Universe. Hustler's University.
But I'll give you an example of where Tate gives a lot of horrible information. He does manipulative things that screw with people's head to control them. So, he gave a tip on if a woman doesn't go meet a woman, tell her that she is the most amazing thing ever and that you just want to be with her, and then try to push her into getting into being a webcam girl. And when she doesn't want to be a webcam girl, basically take your bottom bitch and the one on there and try to friend her and to make it seem like they can have a connection and get this girl to push this woman into the opposite, into doing sex work. And so I'm sure that tip works, but I'm almost paraphrasing, but that tip is
I think you are paraphrasing because I've never heard him really speak about that. You've already heard all these channels like Fresh and Fit, or there's so many that talk about these YouTube shorts where they talk about the dynamics between the dating scene nowadays and the culture and how it is, and the majority of women who are statistically divorced their husbands 80% of the time, and if they're college educated, it's 90%.
But very specifically, he said to get a woman to. He said specifically for women who don't want to go into sex work, this is how you get them into sex work. That I'm not paraphrasing.
Coerce them into it.
Yes, and that you're. I kind of want to show you the clip almost because it is so terrible.
I would love to see it if you can throw it on. What I was saying is like Pearly Things or Fresh and Fit. There's so many channels that cater towards these topics nowadays, and they talk about the top 1% of men. You probably heard that phrase, where the top 1%. This is a guy that's over 6 feet in height, makes 6 figures, is attractive, can protect you because he knows some form of martial arts or something like that. He has all these things going for him, and he makes up what's called the top 1% of the most sought out, attractive males that women go for, supposedly, right? Well, then there's the opposite. What is the top 1% for females? The females with the less body count meaning like how many people you slept with your entire life. So, females that haven't been kind of used up or promiscuous throughout their life, that hold to traditional values as a woman, meaning they're more feminine, they're more, they cover up themselves when they dress up in public. They make up the 1% of females. They're not dressing like a stripper or some kind of prostitute. They're not going to the clubs. They're faithful to their man. I mean, James, Matt, go for it, man. What's your criticism?
Oh no, and I'll bring
Duchess
it up.
wants to get
But
in.
Duchess wants to come in, and we have another one that is saying, tell your woman that she wants that you should be cheating on her. Duchess of Clutches, we are talking Skeptic and Ranting. We are talking about the overwhelming evidence for the resurrection of Jesus. Welcome on board. Oh, we have to get, and then we have to, after you say yours, we have Emmanuel as well.
Yeah, hi guys. I'm good just jumping in after Emmanuel.
Welcome, Duchess.
I heard Andrew Tate, so I wanted to get in.
Yes, and I'm trying, and so I'm going to get Emmanuel in as
Yeah,
well.
apparently Andrew Tate is a trigger word for.
Triggered by Andrew Tate.
Yeah, listen, I know you're an Andrew Tate fan, so this might be the only time you get to speak to a woman. So I would encourage you to listen, and just know that it's obviously it's plainly obvious to anybody with eyes that Andrew Tate is a grifter. He's not a Muslim. He's not. He's not anything he purports to be. He's a pimp. So if that's what you aspire to, then maybe you'll grow up someday.
Oh, he is a pimp, and I don't use that as an insult word, but he's a pimp. He's a bad pimp because he's manipulative, and you shouldn't be tricking women into.
There are plenty of women who are willing.
Yes,
to do it.
just
They
take
don't have to
women
be
that are
tricked.
willing to do them. Don't
Yeah, exactly.
them.
If you have to lie, free choice for anybody, right? But if you have to lie to bring somebody over to your side or convince them into whatever your belief system is to work for you, yeah, not good.
Well, what I would say towards that is when he speaks of a top percent of men who hold these characteristics, the ones I mentioned, like making over six figures or six figures.
Chads, right?
Yeah, the Chads.
We get it. We get it.
Okay. Well, then at that point, you no longer have to stay faithful to a single woman. You have plenty of options open for you that, like why stay single to one particular, why be exclusive?
But but the same
you don't have
thing
to be
applies,
exclusive. You can be non-exclusive and not like a sex trafficker at the same time.
But the same is for women. You, as a woman, if you are independently financial, there's no reason you need one man. You could have two men. You could have three. Whatever it is that you're into and feel, is right for you. Get all the D in the world.
Yeah,
be that
all the
1%
P.
woman.
Whatever
you
you
have
want
to fight
do.
Amy
Yeah.
for it because she's getting all the D she can get.
And I'm sure you've heard his criticism for that throughout history, women who had multiple men were always disdained. Whereas, emperors and kings, it was a natural thing for them to have multiple women.
Yeah, it's a good thing we don't live in the Stone Age anymore. We moved on.
But that's a
Get with the
silly
times.
apologetic. That's basically saying throughout history it's been looked down on. That's it.
I don't think it's just throughout history. I think it's in modern culture today. I mean, when you speak about a slut or a hoe, it's disdained because women, for the average woman to gain multiple body counts, it's quite a fast, easy task. No one praises you for something that's done easy. Whereas men, if they get multiple women, they're called studs. They're called, they're not given some low grade insult. Like men, when women speak and criticize each other, they call each other
you've heard much of the women's songs. The women's songs generally tend to be get the guys to the left, to the left, to the left.
Yeah, the independent, trying to
those 1% women.
That's the thing. I don't think that's 1% women. I think that's the cultural ideal today, that the trend. In other words, like women are trying to be masculine. They're trying to do their thing without men. I don't need men in my life. I can do my own thing. I think that's become the trend. I don't think that's the 1%. That's the majority.
It's not that we don't need men in our lives. It's that we don't need certain kinds of men in our lives that we would have been forced to be with otherwise.
Well, sure, but if you don't need them, then they're probably not the one for you anyway.
Wait, give me your list again. Let's check how much of these 1% women. Start from the beginning.
The 1% women comprise of low body count.
No. You started with the money.
Are you talking about the 1% men?
Oh, it doesn't matter. Men, women.
It's different for women. Men with money don't care about women with money. It's irrelevant to them. They don't care about how much money a woman makes. So that's not part of the 1% ideal for women.
Okay, that is spoken like someone who's never married.
Okay. If you think it takes money to get men, then okay.
It's not that it takes money to get men or women. It's that sometimes men also will value a woman who's been educated and can be financially independent and isn't at his beck and call and isn't forced to be with him because she has no financial reason. She has no financial stability of her own. At that point, why would you want somebody staying with you if just for financial reasons?
There's a difference between a power couple like Jay-Z and Beyonce and Oprah just getting with some 20-year-old because she has money. There's a difference between that. And I mean, if it's valued in any sense by a man, it's because he admires her for her other qualities aside from that. I mean, that's probably the most minuscule on his list that he admires her for. She could be broke and he would still love her.
Sure, but that's again,
how far
I don't
do you
see
think,
how that's any different from men or women.
Yeah, how far do you think money is going to carry you in a relationship if that's what you're valuing the most for men or women?
Well, for men, the way it's put, I've heard in modern. I'm
sure you've watched a lot of Pearly Things. The Pick Me. I heard you.
It's not even Pearly Things. Yeah. So the woman, she's born with inherent status. She can bring life into this world. She has
not beauty. Without a man, she can't.
Well, I mean, there's also the aspect of social media. She can get invited at the age of 19 to get an airplane ticket paid for.
You're watching way too much Fresh and Fit. The amount. I
hardly watch Fresh and Fit.
Listen. You named them already. The Fresh and Fit did the whole thing about 80% of college women are getting flown out to Dubai. Like, how often do you think this happens? I'm not condoning it if it does happen.
No,
but you're completely exaggerating this.
It's not an exaggeration. It's a reality nowadays. I mean, without it, you're only constricted to the men within the vicinity of where you live. Now that social media has become so popular, now you have access to male athletes, football players, movie stars entering your DMs. That's become a possibility because of social media.
Yeah,
so you can't deny that.
100% from Fresh and Fit. These are such.
What, you've never been messaged by a movie star? My wife has. So,
listen, if Brad Pitt messages me, I will drop everything and leave. Okay. Until that happens,
it doesn't have
I'm not
to be
going
Brad
anywhere.
Pitt. It could be anyone.
How many women do you think are getting messaged by movie stars?
You'd be surprised, apparently, because you've never gotten one. I've known many girls that've gotten one. So
from who? From what kind of movie stars?
My own wife. How about that?
Who did your wife get contacted by? What movie star?
He's not a big name, but it was enough to blow her ego.
Like what? Like movie would he have been in?
What the fuck? He was in Adventureland. He wasn't. I'm not talking about Ryan.
Never heard of that movie.
Well, then there you go. It wasn't even a big enough star for you to be aware, but it's still enough to blow up her ego. That's my point.
Okay, and
you obviously never received one of these DMs. Otherwise, you would know what the fuck I'm talking about.
I don't have Instagram or Snapchat or anything.
Okay, well then no wonder. Well then, what are you talking about? Then why are you trying to chime in like you know what you're saying?
You're quoting Fresh and Fit talking points.
No, I'm not. I'm quoting my own. I'm quoting my own life.
You're quoting.
I'm giving examples from my own life, and here you are trying to criticize it.
Okay, you're triggered. I'll let you calm down.
I'm not even triggered. I'm just like trying to tell you the reality, and you're just denying it.
The reality is that 80% of college women are getting flown out to Dubai from oil kings.
No. The reality is that 80% of women are the initiators of the divorce, and it's 90%.
Oh, now we're on divorce, so now we're switching. Okay.
No, because that's what I said 80% for. I wasn't talking about that. Like I don't want to be. I don't want you to mince my words. That's all.
First, we were talking about movie stars and athletes blowing up women's DMs, and now we're going back to divorce. I don't know if he's talking. I can't hear if he is.
You obviously aren't paying attention. If the percentile I was referring to was part of that topic, I was talking about something else when I mentioned 80%. 80% refers to the initiators of divorce being women, and it's 90% if they're college educated.
Okay.
That's what I was referring to. But I mean, if you want to twist what I'm saying, go ahead. But I'm gonna call you out on it.
Yeah, so you brought up divorce, and then you went to all these women are being blown up in their DMs by athletes and movie stars.
Okay, you said I'm a fan of
including
Andrew
your
Tate.
wife.
You're obviously a hater of Andrew Tate. So you
Of
want to
course
come
I
here?
am.
Okay, well then there you go. At least you
Yeah.
admit it.
Why would I why would I care about Andrew Tate? Why would I take him seriously? He's very obviously a grift.
I think
So-
you've just heard snippets from YouTube Shorts and the Facebook Shorts of Andrew Tate. You have no idea what he's about. You've never heard a full-length interview or tried to understand.
Tell me in your mind what Andrew Tate is about.
Trying to wake people up from the matrix, get them away from this a 9-to-5 job, make them become more prosperous and become the best version of themselves.
Do you need to pimp people out to do that?
Do you need to what?
Pimp people out to do that?
Well, that whole thing hasn't even been proven. I mean, he's still on the monitor right now. He hasn't been indicted for that. I mean, the truth will come out in the end.
Yeah, I'm sure it will.
Okay. Well, then you can hold that opinion if you want of him, but I really don't think he's guilty of that.
You're entitled to your wrong opinion. But...
Okay, and you can say I'm wrong until he's put in prison. So, it hasn't been fleshed out yet. It's all in process right now.
So you wanted to talk, obviously, divorce is like a very big thing.
No, I didn't even want to mention any of these topics.
It's a very big thing on Fresh and Fit and with Andrew Tate. So what is your prescription to fix divorce?
To fix divorce?
To fix the problem of divorce.
Maybe go by traditional values, be the 1% woman that I described, which women aren't. They go after the easier route, which is to listen to their single friends' advice, go to the club, get your man on child support, take half, become independent, become more masculine, so on and so forth, which is what our culture is being represented by today, by every aspect in our music, in movies, and in our social media. It's all over the place. You can't ignore it. You can't deny it at this point.
Yeah. So the only thing I'll concede or actually agree with is that divorce and the rate of divorce is a really big problem. I think we're just talking about what the prescriptions are for fixing that. Sure.
And I'm all for that. I mean, because I'm going through it with my own life right now. So I can relate to it.
Yeah, it's not a good thing, right? Especially if you have kids or whatever. And I'm not saying that it's a good thing. I'm not promoting this kind of problem to continue. It's not good. It's not good for kids. It's not good for society as a whole. But what we actually have to look at, and I was being a little flippant at the beginning because I do hate Andrew Tate, but I think it's really, really important that we know what kind of society we want and that we've learned from history what kinds of societies we don't want. So going back to more traditional values, that's fine. If both parties are on board for that, great. All the power to them. I'm all for freedom of decision and choice. But when you have societies that are super trad, women can't get divorced. I don't know if that's the prescription you're arguing for, but we do know that in those types of societies, women are forced to stay home, experience violence. It's a whole mess of things that happen when people are forced, whether culturally or legally, to stay together to somebody that they hate or that's abusive to them or that they don't get on with for whatever reason. So I think we really, really have to be careful, genuinely careful about what we do here.
I absolutely agree. And I'm not talking about the forcing of any of these things. I'm totally against that. I'm for people's freedom, for people becoming better versions of themselves, like I just said. Do you have any kids of your own?
Not yet.
Okay. Well, then I have 4, by the way, just to mention that real quick. But and like I said, I'm going through the situation myself, and so that's why I relate to it. That's why it's been on my radar, and I've been paying attention to it. But I'm not here to talk about pearly things or fresh for fit. Those are minuscule
You
channels.
mentioned them though. You brought them up.
Yeah, because they do give snippets, and people's, they have the attention span of fucking little kids nowadays. Because all we're used to is TikTok little snippets, So if I can get someone's attention through that, then so be it. But I'd rather listen to Better Bachelor, Rational Male, something like that, that go a little bit more in depth in these topics.
Yeah, you should always broaden your, where you get your news from or where you get your
And I do that
entertainment
all the
from.
time. I get it from the internet. I get it from having experiences for myself, whether it be through meditation, whether it be through psychedelics, whether it be through this or that. And I don't restrict myself to one source of information.
That's good, at least. Sorry if I monopolized the conversation there, Amy, and whoever else joined. I apologize.
No, I just wanted to just very quickly just show some of the stuff. I have one of the videos where he says he doesn't allow women to go outside. I have been trying to get the one where he talks about his bottom bitch. Most of his crimes are about coercing women.
Him being a bottom bitch, or
no, very specifically that you use another woman to trick another. He very said that you're never going to get a woman to trust a man to get into sex work, because it's always going to come off sounding kind of skeezy from their perspective. And so what you need to do is you need to get another woman to befriend this woman. And so if you can get another one of your women to befriend this woman, then, and she starts getting into it and she starts saying, oh, it's fun. Sex work is so amazing. You're going to love it. And so what you're doing is you're getting this woman, you're breaking through, coercing her to do something that she didn't want to do.
Using them as recruiters, basically.
Using them as recruiters. So Andrew Tate does the same thing that Jeffrey Epstein did. So he had like the same thing that the woman that's now in prison, Andrew Tate does the same thing, is that he has another woman, because it wouldn't be easy for just Jeffrey to just get, all of these other women and girls. And Andrew also he has the taste for them young as well, or whatever you want to call 15 or 16-year-olds. And
really,
yes, or at least that is what many of the charges that's what the Romanian government seems convinced of. And so very similar. And it may be, that these types of men are alphas or whatever. They have their own islands and all this stuff. But it doesn't matter that they're the 1%. And they say some logical things. I'm very proud of being a madam, but I would never trick anyone into doing anything that they didn't want to do. And if they felt awkward, the correct thing to say is, oh, you should probably never do any of that.
Maybe it's not for you.
Yes, I can't, just so it's not just me just saying things. And then we'll go into Sinister Porpoise. But I just want to quickly over.
I was in a Discord call just before I got on here with a Christian. I don't know who he was, Matt Slick or Slick something.
Matt Slick.
Matt
so
Slick,
that was really, really exhausting and super annoying. And so yeah, I just decided to come on and
have more fun
out on this person. Yeah, I'm sorry, whoever you are.
And I will say, well, I think Caffey's used to getting both love and spice on this channel, and we love Caffey, so send love. I'm just trying, I have this, why he doesn't hold on. I don't know if it's still sharing sound. Make sure that it's like a USB.
In their house, sitting there, bored, completely in love with me. And of course, they don't go out. They're not allowed out. Oh, Tate's away, so they go out with their friends. No. You don't go to the club with your friends. I don't know what kind of bitch ass dude is letting his chicks go to the club with her friends without him. Stay in the house. You don't go nowhere. You know, no restaurants, no clubs, nothing.
It just sounds like he's trying to put up this persona of like this badass alpha. He's trying to sell you the idea that he's this ultimate Chad alpha, and women just do whatever he says because they love it so much.
I had another thing that just an article, and then we have Matt backstage as well. I want to get him. Matt.
Which Matt?
Which Matt? Excuse me. Just trying to separate out, because it is I guess it is complicated, because I don't want to. Sex work already gets enough shit as it is, but I don't want to like give him a completely free pass either. I mean, I've heard him say things that were not completely insane. That's the problem. I've heard what's it called? Jordan Peterson say things that are not completely insane. That's
the thing. You could probably find a sentence or two in Mein Kampf that wasn't, totally bonkers, but that doesn't mean that the major themes of it are right.
But then again, what is insane? I mean, most people don't even understand what the Holy Spirit is.
You're not a Christian, are you, Kathy?
No, not at all. I've told you repeatedly in every visit that I've made on your channel that I'm a perennialist. I don't know if you've ever bothered to look it up.
I don't know what that is. Can you give
I've known that for a while now. We've always looked at you as kind of a pagan spiritualist. So just when you say a statement like most people don't
I
know
remember that
Spirit
word
is.
perennialist.
I figured, even though I've mentioned it every single time I've came on here, but
can you give me like a Sparks Note version, because I don't know what that is.
Perennialist refers to the traditional school, or what's called the primordial tradition, or the perennial philosophy. It's a view on the world's major religions that sees mysticism at the very core and origin of all the world's major religions, such that, and of course I've always emphasized mystical experience a la William James, and the mystical experience is seen as synonymous amongst these religions, so that the revelation of the Holy Spirit or the beatific vision is one and the same with what a Buddhist might call nirvana, what a Sufi mystic might call fana, what a Hindu might call samadhi, what a Jewish mystic might call the Shekinah or Sekel Mufla, so on and so forth. The Taoist calls the flowing of the Tao. It's at the core of all the world's major religions, and it's related to the neuroscience that I've always mentioned as well. And in other words, it's not just me or my opinion. It's what our modern neuroscience has established today. They also emphasize the perennial philosophy. And if you haven't heard of it, that means you haven't been paying attention to modern neuroscientific studies and within the neuroscience of religion.
It's not that I haven't been paying attention. It's that there's so many different fractions of different religions you can get in that it's hard to keep up. What's the difference between a Pentecostal and a
It's not about
Mormon
religion. Every single sect of Christianity has a single root in the Roman Catholic Church. It doesn't matter how much it's branched out into Catholicism or Pentecostalism. It all has a root back to.
It all goes back to
one root.
Yeah.
And what the perennial philosophy is emphasizing is that root.
Okay. Yeah,
the other thing is that he would lie about how much he was paying the girls. Is that he would say, "Hey, it's going to be something like we're going to be sharing a percentage wise. You get, I'm just making 60%, 40%," and he would say, "Cut that in half." And say that these are fees, that these were actually fees. He said, print up a document, make it look all official, get them to sign it. Now you just got a good portion of your money back. Which, once again, is just shady-ass business dealings. And, all right, let's get Not Matt Slick in here. I wanted to talk about the lover boy phenomena that they use, because he tells his people that, well, that is the thing. He tells you you're all going to be mine, not going to be shared. But I'm in for polyamorous relationships. That you should be doing. Let's get Not Matt Slick in. Not Matt Slick, welcome on board. We are Skeptic Ranting on the overwhelming evidence of Jesus. Hope you're doing well as all the other subjects.
Amy, Amy, when I joined the live, I was willing to talk about the constitutional flaw. If you're willing to discuss about some amendments that I think that it should change.
Sure. To the United States Constitution?
I mean, it's not just the United States. I'm pretty sure there's an article in United States, but there's also a similar article in my home country. So the concept of the article was separation of state and church. So I do not that we need a secular government in a sense that if this was a majority, majority of people, if majority of people were agnostics or atheists, it should be a secular government. But if this nation has a majority Christian people in it, it has to be led by the church. On similar point, I think if this was a majority Muslim nation, it would probably be a Sharia law. So what I would say, I don't agree that we need a separation of church and state.
Sure. So secular doesn't mean atheist. It means not putting your finger in other individuals' personal religious freedoms. And so if you are Muslim, you should want a secular government. If you are Christian, you should want a secular government. If you're atheist or agnostic, you should want a secular government. There's no reason to have a religious government. Ever. Or none that I can think of.
What I would say is I looked into the concept of a community abiding by a certain rules, right? So I don't think that the intention of the Holy Scriptures were for individual. I think the law was given for a community. So what I would say is, if I think it is all subjective to the context of how many people are following this faith or not. That's what I think it is.
That just sounds like
I
you're
don't
saying
think that we
whoever's
should
strongest.
advocate.
Well, it just sounds like you're saying whoever is the most popular should be in control.
No, I think what he's trying to say, to sum it up, is you mentioned secular government. I think the term secular has a bias towards atheists, agnostics, non-believers, so on and so forth. Maybe not. Maybe you disagree. But what I think what he's catering towards is a tolerant government, a government that tolerates all sorts of perspectives and views and doesn't allow them to interpenetrate each other without, hurting people's rights and so on.
Exactly. That's why we have a secular government.
We should have more penetration.
But no, the whole point of a secular government is so that people can have their own religious freedom. And so unless you want to actually tell people what they should believe in, you should want it to be secular.
Well, then if you're using secular in the synonymous way that I'm using tolerance, then I agree.
Sure.
Yeah.
I mean, the whole point is you can be, if you're Christian, you can be Christian. If you're Muslim, you can be Muslim. If you're not, you can be not.
Yeah, precisely.
I was wondering if you think
what I would say is I think those ideas are colonist ideas by origin. Like, they kind of like force you, they force, like United States force other nations to be secular because we have this European ideas where we see at the Islam world, and we think that they're not supposed to,
So
because
if I could
they
just
don't have the
interrupt you
same
for a
form of
second,
government.
and then I'll let you respond, maybe. But then I do have to let not Matt Slick have his option. But I'm just gonna play my Uno reverse card because it absolutely is the right thing to do. But when you think of colonialism, you should think of Christianity, Judaism, Islam. These types that have kind of taken over these lands. Islam is not the native originally to. Well, it eventually took over the majority of the Middle East, and there's a lot of, Arabic colonial notions kind of built into it, as well as with, eventually from Levant to European notions for Christianity. And yeah, secularism's actually kind of letting you do whatever you want.
I think you use that term freely. What I think Manuel's trying to say is that secularism does have this baggage in the same way like the term God has baggage to a lot of people. I mean, a lot of people associate secularism with so-called free thinkers, agnostics, non-believers, so on and so forth. There is that baggage there, even though you don't identify with that, Amy.
Well, I don't see it as baggage.
But under secular societies, people still have the freedom to practice their own religions. We're not banning people from practicing their own religion. We're saying it doesn't have a place in dictating the laws of the country.
What I'm saying is that not many people see it in that fashion. They hold on to this type of baggage, and they see it as of course I agree with you. If we hold this definition that Amy does, they're wrong, but yet they still hold on to these nuances that they think are associated with that term, and they think it's restricting. They think it's not part of freedom, and you know what I mean. That's where
it's also because they associate secularism with atheism. They say, excuse me, they say Islam, Sharia law. They say Christianity, we should have a Christian nation. Well, you say atheism, we should have a secular nation, but that's backwards as far as I can tell. We want to have a secular nation so that we can be Christian, Muslim, or atheist. It's not an atheist nation. An atheist nation would be one that forced you to have no religion.
I definitely agree with that, but I think there are some atheists that hold that religion should be eradicated. Matt Dillahunty holds this view. That
I don't think he holds that view. You might want to ask him that view.
Yeah.
That's really a strong anti-theist position, and
he does.
I know I've heard him talk very positively about people in his life who are religious. He values his parents, so you might want to ask him his view on that before we say this is his view.
I've spoken to him personally, and I've heard him say this.
Well, we would probably need to hear it in video.
Sure, and I can link it. I can.
I don't think I've ever heard him say he wants religion eradicated.
He doesn't necessarily say it to that extent. He says, "I want people to grasp logic and let go of it on their own terms." But the assumption that
what a madman.
Yeah.
The assumption that he makes is that logic will naturally lead to a godless perspective.
I don't think so. You've totally changed from eradicate religion to he wants people to start implying more logic.
Well, that's the ultimate goal. I mean,
you can, but he never. You started by saying, anyways. I'm trying not to be confrontational.
Okay, well then let me rephrase. Okay. He thinks that if people are logical in their thinking and become critical thinkers, that it will naturally lead to some kind of form of atheism. I think he's wrong there. I don't think critical thinking necessarily leads to atheism. I think he has that assumption. And if you have that assumption, then eventually, if everyone becomes a critical thinker, then under his perspective, then everyone becomes a non-believer.
But once again, we probably shouldn't be talking about someone who's not here and what they think, because he's always said, a thing I have heard him say is, so now I'm going to do it, is that he didn't become more intelligent when he left religion. So I don't think he would talk.
You're an atheist, aren't you? Not
no, I'm not an atheist. So I've got the MEQ 30 as my picture right there.
Oh, okay. All right. So you're Because that's what I hear a lot of atheists say. This person's not here, so we shouldn't speak on their behalf. But we can
I think that's
extrapolate on things they've said.
Well, not if
think
you're
that's a
just
fair
shadow boxing and lying about what they've said to make
Yeah.
a point.
Yeah, well, I'm not going to lie. I'm only going to base it on things I've actually heard from them. Maybe they've changed your views up until now. Maybe Matt's a theist today, and we don't know about it. You know?
But it's probably just best if But I had a few questions for you, Cafe, if you wanted to entertain.
I don't mind, man. Go ahead.
Well, would you rather talk about women and marriage and all that good stuff right there, or would you rather talk about MEQ 30 and like psilocybin?
Well, I wanted to chime in for the discussion of the topic of the actual show, which is the resurrection of Christ. But if you want to take it elsewhere,
Well,
by all means.
The problem, you said you're not a Christian. I mean, it is the topic of the show, so maybe, but you're not a Christian, as you said.
I'm not a Christian, but I don't disagree with Christians. I hold a view that's compatible with Christianity.
So, do you believe Christ rose from the dead?
I don't. I have a different perspective on how that may have occurred.
Well, I mean, I'm okay to listen to that if you'd like to tell us.
Well, I was on Atheist Uprising, a podcast by Joshua Void, discussing this, and you can go to his podcast if you want to check it out. He invited me to speak on this very topic, and the whole thing that prompted that interview was he saw me in a previous chat box in a previous live video saying, "Hey, what if the resurrection of Christ wasn't a literal one, but a spiritual one?" And so he invited me on the show based on that comment that I made in the chat room. And so it went on from there. The whole interview that he had with me was based on that very question. And so, how do you distinguish between a literal resurrection and a spiritual resurrection? And, you mentioned the MEQ. I would say that if you consider Christ having a so-called mystical experience, which the MEQ is based on, then you have what you might call a spiritual resurrection, a resurrection of spirituality within the human being that's experiencing it. And that was the point that I was trying to get across, as opposed to actual literal death, where you actually physically die and base a whole religion around that concept instead of basing it on a spiritual one, which in my opinion is what it's based on. I don't know if you want to respond to that.
I mean, I think if you don't take the resurrection literally, there really isn't much to discuss, because it could be a hallucination, it could be an experience, it can be something that we can't validate, and then it doesn't become important to religion.
What about a mystical experience?
Well, I don't think I can validate the mystical experience of someone else. Would you agree with that? Like, if someone else has a mystical experience, I would not be able to validate that. I would only.
What do you think our modern neuroscience is doing right now?
They're not
evaluating mystical experience. Why do you think the MEQ was developed in the first place?
That's not what neuroscience is.
Yeah, I'm looking over the research of Roland Griffiths, I believe John Hopkins. I'm sure you're familiar with those names.
Of course.
And yeah, and they're not validating mystical experiences. I know the MEQ 30 quite well.
What do you think the MEQ invalidates?
Invalidates?
Or what do you think the MEQ validates? Why do you think that? What's the whole purpose of the MEQ?
Well, here, I'll read some Duchess of Clutches. Would you mind if I ask you a few questions?
Sure.
Okay, they might be a little bit personal, so you're free to say, I don't want to answer that.
Okay.
Have you ever felt experiences of amazement?
Yeah.
Have you ever had a sense of awe or awesomeness?
Yeah.
Have you ever had a sense of losing your usual sense of time or space? Darn, we were like, go ahead.
Not really.
Not really.
No,
well,
I wouldn't say
well,
so.
the good news for you is, and I put a link in the chat. Amy doesn't have church; she doesn't want. But some people who've taken psilocybin, which is a psychedelic drug, people use to have mystical experiences, quote unquote. People, what the MEQ 30 is, for people who don't know, is a scoring system for mystical experiences.
Okay.
And you just answered some of the questions right there. And if you answer all of them, you get an MEQ 30 score. Now, when you look at the research and what these people put out on this, there's a lot of variation in the people who take the psilocybin and the degree to which they have these experiences. To some extent, people have these experiences without the psilocybin, and then there's documented cases of people having an MEQ 30 without taking psilocybin or any sort of psychoactive drugs. So when you look at what does it validate, it just validates a lot of, they break it down into categories. It's things like positive mood, space time, ineffability, just these feelings of happiness, joy, and oneness with everything around us. And is that
that's what drugs do, though?
Go ahead.
They change. Yeah, go ahead. I don't have any contention with that.
Seem to, when you talk about is something mystical, I think we don't have a good way of defining that or validating it. Cafe.
I would disagree, but
I would agree, hard agree. There's by its very nature, mystical experiences aren't going to be something that's going to be testable or. Yeah, I interrupted.
Well, they don't just use MEQ. Questionnaire. They that's not the only means of measurement that they go by. I'm sure you know that.
Thank you. What is the best way to measure a mystical experience? Like,
they involve fMRI. They involve other means of measuring.
fMRI going to show you? What is magnetic?
Well, it will show you a brain activity that's typical of a so-called mystical experience.
So what happens when you take drugs? Your brain works differently. And then
sure,
if you label that,
it's not exclusive.
Real quick,
it's not exclusive to drugs, which is the point of the research.
But if you go looking for something, do you know what p hacking is?
P hacking.
Yes, John Oliver does a really good segment on p hacking.
Yes.
So the way p hacking works is, let's say I give you a wheel and it's got 5 grand prizes on it, and that relates to the alpha of 0.05. Have you ever heard of alpha of 0.05? Cafe? Have you ever heard of alpha?
Elaborate. I mean, if you could
sure.
Give it a short description.
Alpha 0.05 is what most research uses. If you look at the graphics in the research by the gentleman I mentioned previously, he mentions his p-value and his alpha. So the point is, if I give you a wheel with 100 spaces on it and you spin the wheel and 5 of those spaces are prizes, well, if you spin it one time, what's the chance you win a prize? 5 out of the 100 are prizes.
Well, I mean,
this is a real question. I'm trying to help you understand what the whole.
On these MEQs.
No. Wait, just real quick. I'll
go ahead.
You have all the time. There's 5 out of 100 prizes, so the probability of winning a prize is 5%. This relates to the 0.05 alpha used in statistics, which is a type 1 error rate. Now, here's the problem, and this is what p hacking is. If I give you this wheel and you have a 5% chance of winning a prize, and you can spin the wheel as many times as you want, you'll eventually win a prize. So what some researchers do, and what you could do with an fMRI, is see what parts of the brain light up and map that to the parts of the brain that light up for other things, and then start finding things, start picking through the data till you find things that you want to find. And this is what p hacking is.
Yeah, you're almost talking about like a cherry picking form of neuroscience, and I don't think that's what Johns Hopkins professionals are doing. It sounds like you're making an argument for that.
I've looked through the research, and unless you can point me to this fMRI research, when you look for parts of the brain to light up, and then you say, "Oh, but look, we found this one spot that lights up for this," and then it also lights up here, they're coming in with preconceived notions from what I've seen.
Not necessarily. I mean, like I happen to follow this research very closely, and I don't know if you know this, but the statistical rate. There's been hundreds of studies at Johns Hopkins at this point. We're not talking about small sample size in this modern neuroscientific endeavor. The reason it continues today is because all the efficacy they've been able to have, and if it was bunk like you're trying to claim, then the research would have ended a long time ago. And a lot of
people researching. God, I'm sorry, interrupting.
The majority of I don't know if you're familiar with this term, complete mystical experience. Do you know what that is?
I've heard it before, but go ahead.
Okay. Well, the complete.
That's not an MEQ 30.
It's related to it.
Okay.
So if you hit a high marker on the MEQ 30, you may qualify for what the professional neuroscientists at Johns Hopkins call a complete mystical experience, and that's hitting all 6 criteria that are definitive for this phenomenon that I'm speaking about here. And so a majority of volunteers hit that criteria. We're talking about 80 to 90% of volunteers meeting that criteria. And they hit the markers for the complete mystical experience. And it's not like you can just present the MEQ to any average person like you try to attempt to do with Duchess, and you try to make her answer those questions. And she kind of stumbled with yours. The people who actually have undergone this phenomenon don't waste any time at fidgeting over what they're going to say. They can relate to it completely, and that's what they're looking for. And there is ways to measure this phenomenon. We're talking about a tried and true phenomenon in consciousness, and it's been studied within neuroscience for decades now, since the work even before John Scoplin's, all the way back to the Marsh Chapel experiment, all the way back to the work of William James in the early 1900s. This is nothing new to neuroscience, you know.
I've got the graphic in the side chat here, and if you want to take a look at the graphic, really, there are people hitting the high MEQ 30 scores, but then people are actually rating it at some points a not very important experience in their life. So then you have people hitting low MEQ 30 scores, and then rating it as the single most spiritual experience in their life. Meanwhile, they had no MEQ 30 score. Their MEQ 30 score was close to 0. The variation in this data is wild. And you were talking about fMRIs, and then when you went back to the MEQ 30 kind of complete mystical experience. And so I'm wondering why we aren't focusing on the fMRI, which you're saying is you said was a better way.
Well, the fMRI is something they're experimenting with right now. I don't think they published a study yet with fMRI.
So wait, if they haven't published a study, then why do you have any conclusions on this?
No, I'm not talking about a conclusion with fMRI.
But then you said it was the best evidence. But
no, I never said that.
I said to you, what is the best way for us to evaluate and validate mystical experiences? And you said fMRI.
No, I would say to approach it for yourself, if you ask me. But I mean, within the neuroscience that's being done, the MEQ 30 is but one of many filters that they put the volunteer through. You know, you can't just rely on one filter. Why criticize one filter when there's many filters that they do? It's not one questionnaire that they assess the volunteers.
We've got the MEQ 30. We have the fMRI, which doesn't have studies out yet. What's another good way to validate?
They follow these volunteers for years. You know, they have interviews not only with the volunteer themselves for over time, even after the study is done, but they interview family members, they interview coworkers, they interview so on and so forth. I mean, it's a very thorough process that's done with each volunteer that's being overlooked here. You know, like if almost as you're completely unaware that this occurs, like that there's not.
So
you're aware of
to
that.
repeat back, I'm writing down everything you said here. We've got the MEQ 30. We've got fMRIs, which we don't have studies out for yet to validate. And then they have a thorough process where they interview and follow people for years. And that's how we can validate mystical experience.
Yeah, well, and the MEQ is one of, but other filters. They also use other developed measures that have been developed to gauge this phenomenon, aside from the MEQ. There was one by, what the hell was it? William Pankey. There was one that William Pankey developed that are used in the modern research. There is the MEQ 30 is also one that was developed alongside Pankey's work. There's a
few. Died in 1971. Are they still using what he did?
Yes, they're still. the basis of what they're using is William James' work. The person who coined mystical experience was William James.
We're talking about what ways they have to validate, and Pankey hasn't been around for a long time in this area.
Neither has William James.
I know, but the MEQ 30 is a rather new thing, and so is the fMRI.
And it's based on their work.
Yeah, but we're wondering what ways do they validate right now? And you said,
yeah, well, my whole point is that there's more than one way. It's not just the MEQ 30 that they're, coinciding along these volunteers.
But I'm not hearing any real specifics other than Pankey made up a way back in 1971 when he was giving people psilocybin.
I mean, what more do you? So is your assumption is that the only validation is the MEQ30?
No, that's not my assumption. My conclusion is, from what you've shown me, is that we have no good way to validate mystical experiences.
And that's
you
where
have not presented to me a methodology to validate mystical experiences. You've said MEQ30, fMRIs, they interview people and follow them around for years, and Panky made up stuff back in the 60s and 70s.
So there's multiple filters, not just one.
But you have to be specific here. You have to tell me the filter, how it works, and how that validates a mystical experience. Like, you have to be specific.
Well, I mean, you just did it.
Doesn't help.
You kind of did it right now with Duchess. You know, I mean, I presented the criteria that they use. The other criteria, the 6 points that were based on William James' work, the so-called complete mystical experience. That's another one. I presented all the characteristics to Matt Dillahunty, and he couldn't identify with a single one. You know,
go ahead and give me them if you want. And Emmanuel probably wants to talk about Jesus, and that's the topic of the show. So maybe I don't want to monopolize the time, but do you want to tell me those things real quick?
The 6 criteria?
Sure. Go ahead.
The major one being a sense of unity. You know, this is the most emphasized. The collapse of the subject-object dichotomy that we experience in our consciousness.
One with the universe and one with everything.
Yes, right? Yeah, that you can no longer identify where your body ends or where the universe begins.
100%.
It all becomes one seamless entity.
100%.
The other one is a noetic quality that William James talks about. Are you familiar with that?
Tell me, so I can tell if I identify with it.
Also, I just want to say, before you say that, we have 20 more minutes. And so questions and comments for the panel, this is the time to do so, or you're going to get a chance in your outro.
Amy, would you like us to go back on topic real quick? It's your show.
Well, I like going with the flow of the conversation. I do know that Emmanuel wants to have something to say. So if you guys want to take like another minute to try and wrap up where your point is, and then I know that Matt, you may want to have questions for Emmanuel or back and forth.
Sure. And Cafe, can you just give me all 6? You said sense of unity with the universe, and I agree with that. You said 2 through 6. Can you tell me 2 through 6 real quick? You said noetic was 2.
His presence was a feeling, not something I saw or heard.
There's a video in the background.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I thought it was on mute. I mean, you actually mentioned a few of them.
Well, then everything I've mentioned, I have identified with. But
okay. So unity, the interconnectedness of all people and things, all is one pure consciousness. The other one that people report is a sacredness or reverence that they're what they're encountering is some kind of majesty. You know, something that seems something so far beyond themselves that it is to be respected. The noetic quality is a sense of encountering ultimate reality. A lot of volunteers will say that the experience to them was more real than waking reality itself. That when they return to the baseline of consciousness, that the experience they have as a human being seems like the dream, and what they glimpsed inside that experience was what was truly real.
Yeah, no, I actually had a dream a few nights. I'm not making this up. I had a dream a few nights ago. It was rather scary. I woke up in kind of like shock from the dream, and I can still remember vivid aspects of the dream. So that was the reality, and I'm in the dream now.
Were you still a bodily entity in your dream, roaming in an environment?
No, I was kind of aware of everything, and I even like experienced what the person experienced. It was rather horrific, and
like aware of all things, like kind of like an omniscient sense, like all knowingness.
No, it was like I was all actors within the dream itself, and I could.
Well, that's a form of what I'm saying. I mean, it's kind of
so. Does it sound like I've experienced this?
Yeah, if you experience the sense of all knowingness or omniscience,
I've never taken psilocybin or psychedelics.
Well, you don't have to take this to psilocybin to experience this, you know?
So maybe the experiences we're talking about here are just experiences that humans have.
That's what the neuroscience is pointing to. And that's what I've been trying to emphasize all along.
But then the problem becomes, and this is my last statement here, and you can close on it, whatever. And I definitely want to hear what Emmanuel has to say on Jesus. Here's the problem. If these are experiences that humans have, then we give people drugs and their brain starts to light up in certain areas. Maybe we're just seeing that those drugs activate those areas that create those experiences within that subject's mind. We don't know that it maps to anything outside the subject's mind.
Well,
Everything- Go ahead.
we're okay. I get what you're saying, but where the neuroscientists go further is that yes, it's activating some kind of phenomenon, but this phenomenon isn't new or it doesn't go outside the subject's mind or something like that. It's something that's been happening since time immemorial, since the dawn of time, and all mystics throughout all religions and all ages. That this phenomenon is not exclusive to modern day research. That what you experience, what a person experiences in that study, is exactly what the Buddha felt under the Bodhi tree, or what Christ felt in the prayer closet, or what in Islam, Muhammad shivering in the cave.
Is it possible they ate some like moldy bread and hallucinated?
Some people have considered that. Is it possible that they've always used psychedelics for this? Maybe, but they also consider that maybe human beings have a natural propensity towards it. That maybe that we all have, maybe this is what we all approach the moment before death, but there's a way to glimpse it in the midst of life. And, so there's many things to consider here. And so, yeah, maybe it was psychedelic. Maybe the Eucharist was some kind of mushroom. Maybe Soma of Hinduism, of the Hindu yogis, was some kind of psychedelic. It's obvious that the Aztecs and people, the earlier civilizations were using them. There's no doubt about that. And so why is it so criticized and people want to try to turn it into something? I don't know. But I think there's a lot of evidence for these things.
I think the problem is why it's criticized is you try to make it something beyond. It's just a human experience, probably from our brain chemistry. So I think
I'm not saying that though.
Okay, so
that's not me.
Okay, so you
that's
don't
the
think
neuroscientists that I listen to, that I try to reiterate.
Outside of Roland Griffiths, what neuroscientist is saying this?
Why do you think they related to the perennial philosophy?
I just want I don't want you to flip the question. I just want to know, you said I listened to neuroscientists. You said plural. So my question was, outside of Roland Griffiths, who I know
virtually every single form of science that's doing this research.
I'm asking for a name.
A name? There's studies out of the UK that are all in congruence with each other.
Can you give me a name?
The one out of UK? They're doing DMT studies, and I don't recall the.
I'm gonna try one last time, and I'll stop. What is the name of a neuroscientist who agrees with you?
Bill Richards.
Bill Richards, thank you. I'll look into Bill Richards.
William Richards is his real name. Or Bill is the nickname, but
he's Johns Hopkins also, right?
I believe he's Johns Hopkins also. I mean, but there's others. I mean, like the one that did Rick Strassman. That did the DMT studies.
William Richards is not a neuroscientist. He's a psychologist.
I do know that.
Well, no, my question was, what neuroscientist agrees with you? And you gave me
that's why I mentioned.
You gave me someone who basically Roland Griffiths, who's not a neuroscientist.
Strassman.
Okay, how do you spell Strassman?
Strassman.
Okay, neuroscience. Okay, thank you. I'm not trying to be argumentative. Maybe take over if you want. He's also a psychiatrist. He's not a neuroscientist.
I'm okay. He's a psychiatrist. He studies the mind.
You said the neuroscientists, and you failed twice to give me neuroscientists.
I guess I just don't see what the big contention is, because we know that when you give people drugs, their brains light up in all kinds of funky places. So
my problem here is if you're telling me, I would listen to neuroscientists. I believe, follow the science, listen to the scientists.
Yes.
So your claim was there are neuroscientists, plural, that are pointing to this being.
No, yes. Man, there's one. He's out of the UK. I really I can't recall his name at the moment, but
because I will look into this. I will.
Yes. Okay.
The problem is you're not giving me anything to look into. You're not giving me neuroscientists.
I can give you. I mean, if you type in neuroscientist psilocybin, a lot of these neuroscientists.
Can you type it in and find the one you listen to?
No. A lot of these do share the same opinion that they're involved with these research.
Okay. Just this is the last time I'll try. Give me the name of a neuroscientist who agrees with you.
All right. Let's see. There's one in particular. Robin Carhart Harris.
Okay, Robin Carhart Harris. Robin Lester Carhart Harris. Okay. Okay. Looking them up right here.
I would check him out, man. I really recommend that guy.
I'll look into his stuff. I'll see what he talks about. I'll see what he says.
But he's from the UK studies, and one thing you have to consider or understand about the UK studies is that they don't refer to it as mystical experience. They use a different term. They don't use the same terms that the American researchers use. They refer to this, I guess, ego death phenomenon as a reduction in what they call they have a name for it in the UK, and I usually don't use it. That's why I can't recall it at the moment, but they don't use the term mystical experience in those studies.
I'll have to read. I do not know this guy, so I have to read up on his research on LSD and stuff like that. So,
guys,
go ahead.
We're gonna take a pivot. I want to thank Kathy and Not Master for that conversation. But Emmanuel, I'm gonna hand it over to you if you'd like to say something, and anyone can respond. But we got 10 more minutes left until we're going to outros.
I just want to add one thing. The UK researchers call it the default mode network. That's their reference to what maybe Freud would have called the ego. And so they noticed that when people are undergoing this phenomenon within fMRI research that they've done, they can see that there's very diminished activity in self-reflective networks in the brain that account for the so-called ego, or what they call the default mode network, meaning the self-references, like, oh, I'm gonna go do this tomorrow. I'm doing this. I did this yesterday.
So, Cafe, I gotta stop you because this is pseudoscience. The default mode network is just basically what scientists and neuroscientists have figured out is the baseline for human brain activity. So when you're in an fMRI, they give you a task to do, or they give you whatever, and the default mode network is the imaging in between whatever task you're being asked to do.
But it's you that's doing the task. At the height of these psychedelic experiences, there's no longer a you to perform the task. Therefore, the areas of the brain that define the default mode network are diminished. There is no high activity there. They're completely diminished. That's not to say that when you're on psychedelics that this activity overall is diminished. It's actually heightened. There's heightened activity in at the height of these experiences.
It's just the interval in between tasks that you can see. That's why it's a baseline.
Sure, but I think they're trying to depict something very different with their research. They're not really focusing on the activity of the default mode network. They're focusing on how it reduces in these type of phenomenon.
Emmanuel, are you here? Because if not, I get the feeling the 8 minutes are going to be preoccupied.
Okay, so what I would like to speak in the conclusion is, I speak to a lot of skeptics, and they seem to kind of do a goal shift. They say that they say that they require evidence, and when we give them evidence, they say that it's not sufficient, or they're trying to make an excuse to the valid argument that you've just made. So I do believe one thing in conclusion. What I do believe is Christianity is very demonstrable, and what I would say is, we have a sufficient amount, good reasons to believe in Christianity. That's what I would like to say in conclusion.
Emmanuel, you think Jesus rose from the dead, right?
I believe that.
What is like the number one reason you believe that?
I believe that all scriptures are God breathed. So scripture says that Jesus was crucified for sins and he rose from the dead by the power of the Holy Spirit.
Do you take the Bible literally?
It depends on the part of scripture.
Okay.
And I would add that a literal interpretation of the Bible is a naive interpretation.
Well, what I'm wondering is, just for me, and I'll tell you, I can't take, when I read the Gospels, the Synoptic Gospels, I just see them as copies of each other. And I don't see any reason to believe what the authors wrote is true. Why do you believe the Bible is God-breathed?
Let's say that for the Gospels, where, let's say that we don't have, enough thing, to verify who wrote it or whatever. I think we could rely on the New Testament epistles. So I'm pretty much sure that this is the faith that the Apostle Paul preached even after the Gospels. So even if we doubted the Gospels, we can still believe that Jesus rose from the dead.
So you think the apostles are good reason to believe, like the people who follow Jesus? But
no, what I'm saying is I specifically mentioned Apostle Paul because we know that he was somewhat he was very familiar to the Hebrew scriptures. So we could say that the New Testament. Let me just make my point.
Okay.
The New Testament epistles lines up with the Old Testament prophecies. Those are all what I'm saying.
Why do you trust Paul?
I believe that he was sent by God, and I do believe that Jesus Christ authorized the apostleship of Saul of Tarsus. That's
So
what I think.
not Matt
Because
Slick. You can extrapolate from what he said that he's always going to be in an area of belief. He's just going to accept it for what it says. It's not something that
Well,
he
I don't want to
experienced.
extrapolate. I want to ask him. I want to get his views.
But you're leading yourself into the same place.
Well, no, but I'm
Yeah,
wondering.
you are. I mean, go ahead. You can ask him if you want, but you're going to prolong the show, and maybe he wants to get on with it.
No. I think Amy's going to tell us when the show's over, which is totally fine. But Emmanuel,
Well, I think you're going to get the same answer every time. I believe it because I believe it because I believe it.
Well, I'm going to let Emmanuel speak for themselves.
Go ahead.
So, Emmanuel, I'm wondering, you think that God, is this accurate? You think that God chose Saul to give him an experience on the road to Damascus, and he became Paul? That's what you believe? Is that accurate?
yeah, he was apostle for the Gentiles, while Peter was apostle for the Jews.
But why? Let me say this. You know the Mormon story, right? That the angel Moroni appeared before Joseph Smith gave him the golden plates, right?
I've read Joseph Smith visions. I've read some part of the Book of Mormon.
Okay, so Paul makes a claim he had a vision. Joseph Smith makes a claim he had a vision. I'm assuming, and please tell me if I'm wrong, that you don't believe Joseph Smith. Is that correct?
I mean, there are a lot of religions that claim that they have vision from God. Just because he said you have vision from God doesn't demonstrate that it was from God or there is a God. What I'm saying is we have sufficient reason for Christianity rather than, any other faith.
Well, we're just talking just about Paul and his vision right now. Is it possible?
Okay.
Is it
so
possible
what I would say is just because he said he had a vision, that I'm not saying that's the evidence that Paul was authorized by Jesus Christ.
Yeah.
What I am saying is the thing.
Go ahead.
I'm sorry.
No, you go ahead.
What I am saying is I think the doctrines of the New Testament lines specifically with the Jewish scripture. That's what I'm saying. So just because you followed Paul or any of the gospel message, you wouldn't be contradicting the laws, the prophets, and the Psalms of the Old Covenant.
Do you think it's
Yeah,
possible?
did I answer your question?
Not exactly, and I don't mean that in a mean way. I'm just saying it didn't really get to my question about why you believe Paul. Like, we could talk about the gospels lining up, we could talk about those things, but I think a lot of Christianity is based on Paul and the letters he wrote to the different cities, like city of Corinth. And my question is, like,
It's because the majority of the New Testament scriptures were written by Paul.
yeah,
So
but
you know
why should
that the
why should we
idea
trust the
of
word this guy says? Why should we believe this guy?
why should we believe so? What I think is there are different reasons why people believe those messages. Personally, I have my own reason. One of it will be the historical foundation of Christ's teaching came about. So we know from history that it wasn't beneficial to actually make up a faith like Christianity. They wouldn't have probably done it to gain power or whatever. The apostles, what they preached was the opposite, where they faced a certain kind of like torture from the Roman government specifically,
Do you know?
because we know that from history that Christians were the most persecuted in the ancient world. The second will be post conversion by itself was a very compelling one, because he persecuted the church. So we know that the Christians' belief was pretty much against what Paul thought that God has ordained. So his change of heart is pretty much, I think, is one of the supernatural events of the New Testament.
Well, here's the thing, though. You mentioned the persecution of people like Paul and other Christians. Do you know what happened to Joseph Smith?
I know that he was martyred for his beliefs.
He was killed by a mob.
But you can't dismiss. Okay, I'm sorry.
Well, but do you think that makes his claims more believable, less believable, or does not impact his claims? Like, more believable, less believable, or does not impact his claims?
Yeah, but having original concept.
Wait. The question is, Joseph Smith was killed by a mob. He claimed to meet with the angel Moroni, and he started his religion because of that. Does that make the claim of his religion more believable, less believable, or does not impact his claims?
Well, I don't think, I'm not saying that just because he died for his beliefs makes it valid. What I am saying is, I'm just like trying to give.
I'm not asking if it's valid.
What do you call it? I'm trying to debunk some of the claims that I get from skeptics.
Let me ask
when they say that Christianity was made, to control, or the government has collided to done that, where we know from history that that's not the case.
Outro, yeah. Let me try one last question here before we go to outros. Do you think Jesus's followers being willing to die for their beliefs, let's say they did, do you think that makes Christianity more believable, less believable, or does not impact how we should view Christianity?
It doesn't have to impact how we view Christianity. What I am saying is we could pretty much rely on the New Testament Apostle Paul. That's all what I said, because it specifically lined up with the belief that we had in the Old Covenant. That's all what I'm saying.
So all we really need is Paul, do we?
No, I'm saying that Paul's message is pretty much consistent with the Old Covenant. That's all what I'm saying.
Okay. Well, thank you for, Emmanuel, the back and forth. I appreciate it.
Okay.
Woohoo! With that, we are heading into outros in the exact opposite order which we came in, which means, Matt, since you're the most recent to join us, you're going to be starting us off, but we're all going in order as we have been skeptic and ranting on the overwhelming evidence for the resurrection of Jesus, along with a whole bunch of other fun topics, and we're going into our outros. Woo! Thank you so very much, not Matt Slick. It was lovely having you on with us as we skeptic and ranted on the overwhelming evidence for the resurrection of Jesus. What you got going on the internet, and what are your final thoughts?
Thanks for having me swing by here towards the end, and good conversations. And I want to let you have a good evening. So I'll let you go. And thank you, Emmanuel and Cafe and Duchess of Clutches. I didn't mean to scare you there with not Matt Slick. So
You're good.
Bye.
Woohoo! Thank you so very much. Not Matt Slick. I keep on wanting to just say Matt, and now that is actually pretty funny. Thank you so very much, and we're moving right on to Emmanuel. We have been skeptic and ranting on the overwhelming evidence for the resurrection of Jesus. Hope you had a fun time. What you got going on, and what are your final thoughts?
Thank you, Amy Newman, for providing this kind of space to chat and chit-chat. I appreciate for giving me this opportunity. So it was actually all of the people that were speaking. I probably much appreciate that this group chat that we had, because I think that they were pretty much prepared for all the talks that we had. It's pretty much entertaining, and also I've gained a lot of wisdom from it. Thank you, Amy. That's all what I say.
Thank you so very much, Emmanuel. And we're going right down the line and keep on coming back. Duchess of Clutches. We have been having fun. We've been skeptic and ranting on the overwhelming evidence for the resurrection of Jesus. What you got going on, and what are your final thoughts?
Yeah, thanks everybody. It was really civil, and I definitely took the Tate bait at the beginning. I just yeah, sorry to derail. I guess we didn't really go over Jesus stuff. But it was really good chatting, so thank you so much.
Woo-hoo. Thank you so very much, Duchess of Clutches. Like I said, keep on coming on. I love all y'all. And last, certainly not least, Kathy, thank you so very much for joining us on our skeptic and ranting the overwhelming evidence for the resurrection of Jesus. What you got going on, and of course, what are your final thoughts?
Sure, man. Thank you, Amy, once again for inviting me. I really appreciate it. I just want to say I hope Duchess can really reconsider Tate's spiel and listen to an actual full conversation or interview with him instead of the snippets to really gauge what he's about. After that, I will say that the very topic of the show is really what I wanted to chime in about. I didn't mean to go into that other stuff. I wanted to go into the resurrection. I did discuss it at length with Atheist Uprising. That's Joshua Voigt's channel. He called I think he titled it, Did Jesus die a spiritual death? And if you really want to know my thoughts on that and how elaborate we get into that, I recommend going to check out that channel. That's all I got to say. I have my own channel if you want to check it out. I have my calls into the Atheist Experience where I talk to Matt Dillahunty, Talk Heathen, pretty much Aaron Raw. I've spoken to all of them. Tracy Harris, if you want to check that out, visit my channel. It's under the same name, Cafe. It's under the same image of the Skull Kid from The Legend of Zelda. I don't know why I chose that, but I can tell you in one of these videos maybe. But yeah, that's all I have to say.
Woo! Thank you so very much, Kathy. Always lovely having you on, and keep on coming on. And all right, I actually not only do I want to thank my panel for a very, like Duchess said, a very civil conversation, and I was really enjoying both the back and forth that they were having, the Kathy and Matt and Emmanuel. I also want to give a huge thank you, a shout out to Regos, who gifted 5 memberships out there. I really want to thank you for being an amazing member of the Skeptic and Ranting community. And I want to say congratulations to all those memberships that they gave out there. We hope that we keep on making more fantastic content for you guys, gals, and everything in between. So thank you so much. In fact, thank you, Regos. And I also put into the chatosphere, the Fiverr, the Fiverr. Look, we're on Facebook. Hi, Ma. We're even on this. We should be on Twitter too. All of the fun stuff, the YouTubes and the Twitches. If you would like to actually have your own show produced, then please head down to Fiverr, and I will help you do whatever your podcast is. You can be produced by people who are related to Jewish space. I keep on saying related to Jewish space lasers, but that would be like an anthropomorphic Jewish space laser. I guess it's entities that have lasers from other galaxies you could be produced by. Or if you're just a member, a channel member, a Patreon, a Twitch subscriber, we can help make your show on here at the Talk Skeptic to Be brand, and we can get your expertise and knowledge out to the people. And with that, I hope that you all had a fantastic night on this episode of Skeptic and Ranting, the overwhelming evidence for the resurrection of Jesus, where we watched a video from the channel, The Word Room, called The Overwhelming Evidence for the Resurrection of Jesus. For a good time worth coming back from the dead. Though I do want to thank my co-host James W., as well as, ding, I have our Peter in the back of my head, as well as our panel of guests, the amazing Kathy, Duchess of Clutches, Emmanuel, and Matt, woohoo! As well as all the lovely people in chat, our awesome mods who make the stream so great, and of course, lovely viewers like you who make this channel even possible. If you enjoyed the show, please don't forget to like, follow, or subscribe. BT Dubs. Multiple streams. We're going live. It's a busy weekend, but you should be checking out. You should be checking out Bree at Hive Science. You should be checking out Mark Reid at Mark Reid Atheism. You should be checking out Tangang at The Flavor. These are all amazing channels. I'm going to be on Randolph Richardson and Tacos are, like to think, my own as well. Our Theist Helpline tomorrow at 11 a.m. EST. And with that, I hope you, the like, the follows, the subscribes. If you hit that bell icon, it gets you to join our live streams, see our premieres. We'll get to say hello to everybody. In fact, I'll shout you out if you say goodbye in a second. You could also leave a comment once the video is done, or a super thanks, which is like a super chat, but afterwards. And we'll even give your name out on the next episode. After the show, the Skeptic and Ranting Discord server opens up for even more fun, the link of which is in the description below, along with all of our fantastic channel members, Twitch subscribers, Patreons. If you're a member of both, you get promoted to the commander of the girl deck, which gets priority above all the others. But of course, the best way to help us out and to unlock unique perks for yourself is by heading to our Patreon, as I clickety-clack, at patreon.com/Amy Newman. I am Amy Newman, and we will see you all on the next episode of Skeptic Ball Z. Good night, everyone!